Chapter 1482. Jiamen Pass. Guanrang frowned. He seemed to remember something and asked in surprise, "My lord, do you mean to attack with fire?" Jiang Pingji pointed at the corpses piled up at the foot of the city wall. Some were dead, some were still breathing, but their injuries were too severe. They were probably struggling at death's door. She said, "Although there's no dry wood nearby to help with the burning, it's not easy to put out these corpses when they burn." That was the only guess Jiang Pingji had left after thinking about it. She didn't know if she had guessed correctly, but it was better to be prepared. It was better to be more vigilant. Guanrang didn't dare to delay and immediately gave the order. Although they reacted fast enough, they still couldn't keep up with the changes on the battlefield. Nieliang didn't retreat immediately. Instead, he chose to retreat while fighting. He wanted to maintain order and reduce casualties as much as possible. When two armies fought, retreat was also important. If one side was defeated and fled without a second thought, it was basically over. The enemy could take advantage of the chaos and chase after them, especially when they met someone like Jiang Pingji who loved to fight. Even if she was the general guarding the pass, she would lead her troops out of the pass to chase after the enemy. How could they reduce casualties and deter the enemy from chasing after them? Of course, it was to send people to stall the enemy and fight while retreating. Only by maintaining the army's formation could they reduce losses. Exposing one's back to the enemy without taking any precautions was tantamount to handing over one's life to the enemy. Nieliang naturally wouldn't make such a mistake. While they retreated, the rain of arrows on the city wall didn't stop. The enemy slowly retreated more than 30 meters, but Jiang Pingji didn't dare to let her guard down. She frowned even more. Just a small fire attack. Nieliang looked at the city wall. Although he couldn't see who was standing on it, he was sure that Jiang Pingji was paying attention to the situation at the front like him. Of course, he remembered the humiliation yesterday. Today he pretended to attack to test the enemy's strength, but he also wanted to get back at her. Unfortunately, Jiang Pingji was too cautious. She had already cleaned up the forest near Zhanjiang Pass. If not for this great fire might have surrounded the entire Zhanjiang Pass. It was a southeast wind that day. The wind wasn't strong, but it was just right for Nieliang. Thousands of archers shot arrows at the corpses below the city wall. Wave after wave, none of the arrows reached the battlements. Some soldiers who didn't know what was going on couldn't help but laugh. What was the use of shooting rockets at a dead person? Jiang Pingji's face turned solemn because she smelled a familiar pungent smell in the wind. It was easy to miss if one did not smell it carefully. Both sides had used fire arrows during the battle. As a result, the battlefield was filled with thick smoke. Some unlucky corpses were hit, and their clothes and corpses gave off a burnt smell. Under the cover of this smell, the smell of black oil, kerosene, and sulfur was easily ignored. Jiang Pingji stood on the city wall and looked down. She scanned her surroundings. After a while, she found that the clothes worn by the enemy's corpses were a little strange. Some of the soldiers even had firewood wrapped around their waists. The firewood was bound in linen cloth that had been washed with black oil. The scene of the battle between the two armies was extremely chaotic. Neither the supervisors nor the frontline soldiers noticed this, so it was easy to overlook it. This Nieliang, Jiang Pingji clenched her fists. On the other side, Sun Wen, who was supervising the battle, also noticed that the speed at which the corpses were burning was abnormal. In the span of a few breaths, the small flame had turned into a towering blaze that quickly spread. If the city wall of Zhanjiang Pass had not been made of huge stones, the fire would have reached it. Seeing that Zhanjiang Pass in the distance was surrounded by orange flames that soared into the sky, Nieliang's depressed mood eased a little. Zixuan, send someone to investigate which General Liu she promoted after this battle. On the battlefield, he could consecutively destroy several catapults in a very short period of time. Such archery skills could be considered valiant anywhere. He might not become the main general to lead the troops to kill the enemy, but he would not be a nobody. It was impossible for Jiang Pingji not to reward him generously for his meritorious service. Nieliang only needed to send someone to pay attention to who was promoted and rewarded. He could basically lock onto his target. Wei Yong agreed in a low voice. He saw that Niel Yang's complexion had improved a little, and his mood also relaxed a lot. There's one thing that we need to pay attention to. The catapults under Lu Shi's command are obviously better than ours. Their power is extraordinary. Niel Yang's feigned attack was not only to regain his dignity, but also to find out the enemy's background and see what cards they had up their sleeves. When the enemy showed off the catapults, he did not pay attention, but he soon discovered that the frequency and distance of the catapults on the enemy's city wall were much higher than his own. If he only discovered this during the final battle, he would definitely be caught off guard by the enemy. He could still make up for it now. Wei Yong said, Lu Shi values the Mahists very much. He is very respectful to the scholars who are from the Mahists under his command. It is expected that the catapults are powerful. I'm just worried that other than the catapults, they are still hiding other killing moves that they have yet to reveal. Niel Yang asked him. Did the spies we sent out find out any relevant information? Lu Shi is extremely cautious in his work, and he is very strict in guarding the supplies. No matter who it is, they need to show their token and register their name to enter and exit. Our spies can't find out more. Wei Yong shook his head regretfully and changed the topic. However, a few years ago, before Lu Shi grew up, I did leave a trick up my sleeve and ordered a few men of sacrifice to sneak into Dongqing. They seem to have gained a lot, and are currently on their way back secretly. Niel Yang said. Zishuan is still more thoughtful. Wei Yong shook his head and sighed. No, it's only because of my third brother. That one called Wei Ci. Niel Yang still remembered Wei Ci. After all, there were not many men with such charm in the world. He was a person who left a deep impression. Speaking of which, Wei Ci could be considered as Niel Yang's savior. If Wei Ci had not taken his pulse, Niel Yang might have only realized that he had been tampered with before he died. Even if the lord chosen by Zixiao doesn't show it on the outside, there must be something extraordinary about her. We have to guard against her. If Jiang Pingji knew about this news, she might be angry for a while. In fact, Jiang Pingji was very angry now. The fire spread very quickly. Even though Qiguan Rang had sent people to fetch water, Niel Yang used black oil and other substances to ignite the fire. There were thousands of corpses burning underneath. It was impossible to extinguish the fire by relying on manpower. There was something that was even more annoying. When the enemy soldiers climbed the ladder for the last time, they secretly pierced the sack containing the black oil, and let the black oil flow down the city wall. When the corpses below formed a big fire, the flames ignited the black oil on the city wall. The flames climbed up from below and spread to the towers and watchtowers on the city wall. For a moment, everyone was in a sorry state. Even so, Jiang Pingji could only suppress her anger and order people to move the injured soldiers and catapults on the city wall. Chapter 1483. The wind fanned the flames, and the fire burned vigorously. Even from far away, one could see the thick smoke rising into the sky from Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji and the rest looked calm. Not to mention them, the soldiers under the tent did not have any reaction. Those who were supposed to put out the fire did so. Those who were supposed to move the injured soldiers did so. And those who were supposed to move the catapult carts did so. The mental fortitude of the idle fish in the live broadcast room was not as strong. Many salted fish covered their mouths and vomited after watching for a while. Especially when Jiang Pingji said, "There's the smell of cooked meat in the air." The entire bullet screen stopped. She had been chased off the city gate tower by Qiguan Rang, and was feeling gloomy. When she saw the salted fish's reaction, her depressed mood rose a few notches. Host V. No way. How many years have you been with me? What kind of bloody and violent scenes have you not seen? This is just a small matter. Calm down. There were some things that the more one saw, the more one would naturally calm down. They were still lacking in knowledge. Jiang Pingji spoke casually, as if what was burning outside was not thousands of corpses, but thousands of suckling pigs. Tudufeichio. You can never get used to this kind of thing. After all, the environment is different. Guikai Guofeng Xiao. Once again, I'm impressed. I can travel to another world, but not in the ancient times. If I have to be in the ancient times, I can't be in troubled times. If I have to be in troubled times, I can't be a soldier. If I have to be a soldier, I can't be a pawn. The victory of the two feudal vassals was basically piled up with the lives of the soldiers at the bottom. It wasn't that the host wasn't good. It was just that as a pawn, he really didn't have any future. Yen Tianmen Granduncle Master. Speaking of time travel, I suddenly remembered that the next round of Dream of 1,000 Years will start the day after tomorrow. Puff up proud flat chest. He's a lucky emperor after all. His treatment shouldn't be that bad. It'll be a pain in the ass if he's sent to the battlefield. Yulongyin. Aren't they afraid of being thrown into the battlefield? Are they deserters? If they meet the streamer, maybe they can ask for her autograph and take a picture with her. The salted fish were the best at straying from the topic. Just a moment ago, they were trembling in fear, covering their mouths and vomiting. Now that their attention was diverted, they immediately began to imagine the identity of the next Dream of 1,000 Years, lucky emperor. Some people teased, while others immediately came up with interesting jokes. Looking at the streaming room that had returned to normal, Jiang Pingji snorted secretly. She was really bored out of her mind. She was actually worried about these salted fishes not adapting well. They were clearly adapting well. She, on the other hand, should be the one worrying. Once again, I'm impressed by my brilliance. Jiang Pingji glanced at the god-slaying saber in her hand and sighed. If I hadn't cut down the nearby trees in advance, I don't know how long this fire would have lasted. Perhaps Nieliang would have been able to take advantage of the situation and break through. Just as she was feeling emotional, the old general's private message rang. Your Abba. It's going to rain soon. This is really the work of the chosen one. Jiang Pingji's face was full of questions. Rain? At this time? She looked up at the sky. It had been dark since morning. She could see that it had been raining recently, but not today. The old chief quickly sent her another message, mocking Jiang Pingji's failure in geography. Your Abba. Even though you're already the Legion commander and the future marshal of the Federation, and no one will question your education background, don't let the cat out of the bag. Didn't you notice that the terrain of Zhangjiang Pass is very strange? The pass is narrow, the hinterland is wide, the mountains on both sides are high and steep, and the middle is low. This kind of terrain is quite bad in terms of air circulation. It should have been raining on your side, but the fire accelerated the formation of the rainwater. In my opinion, at this rate it will rain in half an hour at most. Don't you think you should prepare for it? Jiang Pingji also heard it, and she suddenly looked a little embarrassed. I entered the children's military school when I was very young. Within 2 years, I was directly recruited into the genetic warrior training camp. It's normal for me to fail my cultural classes. Jiang Pingji began to act shamelessly. How could she admit that she was not cultured enough? Really? It will rain in half an hour? The dear old chief only gave her the 8 syllables. It was up to her whether she believed it or not. Jiang Pingji, you're the top student, you're right. She was thinking about how to manipulate the situation when a gust of wind came in. My lord, I have something to report. Jiang Pingji said. Coincidentally, I also have something to tell you. Wuxia said. My lord, you may speak first. Jiang Pingji said. I have a premonition that it's going to rain soon. Wuxia could not help but laugh. Coincidentally, I want to talk about this too. After the fire was ignited, the southeast wind, which was originally gentle, grew stronger. The wind fueled the fire, and it burned even more fiercely at the pass. The sky, which was initially bright, seemed to be covered with a layer of black gauze. And there was a faint trend of rain. Jiang Pingji smiled evilly. I hope that before the fire is extinguished, it will rain, even if it's just a drizzle. Exactly, Wuxia said. At least the enemy will know. Jiang Pingji said to him. One is marked by the company one keeps. The ancients did not deceive me. Wuxia was also black-hearted. If Nieliang really knew, he would be so angry that he would be in trouble. It was not easy to get back at them with the fire, but who knew that the heavens would not give them face and send rain to help Jiang Pingji and the others extinguish the fire? Although this was a normal change in the weather, with a little use of public opinion, the image of their lord as the child of destiny could be created in an instant. Once it was confirmed, The soldiers under Niel Yang's tent would probably be restless for a while. They were naturally not afraid of fighting with others, but if they were to fight with the child of destiny, chosen by the heavens, would there be any hope of victory? Once the morale of the army was shaken, the morale would also be low. Jiang Pingji was used to using her advantages, so she would naturally not let go of this marketing opportunity. She looked at Wei Xiai and said, Zixiao, do you think I should set up an altar or perform a sword dance to pray for rain? It would be more effective? Wei Xiai said, No, if there is no rain, won't the Lord be passive? Even if Wei Xiai was 90% confident, he dared not joke around with Jiang Pingji's reputation. Wei Xiai rejected it, and Jiang Pingji did not insist. She did not like to dance. The two of them muttered. Qiguan Rang and the others were in a much more difficult situation. Old Master Sun Wen was sent away due to his old age, so he could not leave at will. His originally fair and clean face was smoked black, and the beard that he carefully groomed every day was also a little burnt. Because the fire could not be controlled, Qiguan Rang could only retreat from the danger zone. The medic saw that the back of his hand was red and swollen, and he suggested, Military advisor, the back of your hand is swollen. Why don't you apply some ointment on it first? Qiguan Rang agreed. When the medic applied ointment on his hand, a drop of water fell on his eyelashes. He blinked subconsciously, and after a while another drop of water fell between his eyebrows. Qiguan Rang widened his eyes in shock, and he asked the medic with difficulty, Do you feel anything? There seemed to be raindrops just now. At this moment. Chapter 1484. It's not an illusion. It's really raining. Qiguan Rang, who was always calm, did not care that the medics were still bandaging his wounds. He suddenly raised his hands high and pretended to catch the rain. The rain changed very quickly. At first, it was a drizzle, but soon it became a torrential downpour, drenching him from head to toe. Qiguan Rang did not care about his current embarrassing appearance. He could not help but hold his knees with both hands and bend over to laugh. He laughed so hard that he almost cried. On the other side, Sun Wen also ran into the rain. His eyes were filled with shock and surprise. He could not believe what he saw. Grandpa. Sun Lan secretly ran over because she was worried about Sun Wen. She happened to see her grandfather running into the rain. The rain is so heavy. Why don't you find a place to hide? An old man's body was incomparable to a young man's. Sun Lan was really worried that his grandfather would fall ill in the rain. He could not take the shock. He used the umbrella in his hand to shelter Sun Wen from the rain. He did not care that most of his clothes were wet. Sun Lan said, I'll take you to shelter from the rain first. I'll cook a bowl of ginger soup later to ward off the cold. Sun Wen laughed heartily as he gave his grandson a tight hug. He patted his grandson's back and said with a smile, Today was really a joyous day. This rain couldn't have come at a better time. Ha ha ha. I can't wait to see how ugly Niel Yang and the others' faces are. Sun Wen and the Nie family had a deep grudge. Even if Niel Yang was not a real enemy, he was still a disciple of the Nie family. They were on opposing sides. It was hard to say who would win the battle that day, but Niel Yang set a big fire before he left, which made Jiang Pingji's side very embarrassed. Who knew that even the heavens could not stand it anymore? It rained heavily in time and suppressed the rapid fire. It was simply rain from the gods. Sun Wen had not laughed so freely in a long time since he left Zhongzhou and came to Dongqing. Sun Lan felt a lump in her throat when she heard her grandfather being so happy. After much persuasion, the old man was finally appeased. When the grandfather and grandson went to the commander's tent, they happened to meet Qiguan Rang, who came in the rain. Sun Wen exchanged greetings with him, smiled, and modestly offered a few pleasantries. Sun Lan could not help but say, Even if you want to be modest, wait until you enter the main tent. You'll probably have to drink a few bowls of ginger soup. After he finished speaking, Qiguan Rang and Sun Lan entered the commander's tent with smiles. He was chased out by Jiang Pingji not long after he entered. There's nothing urgent right now. You should at least change into a clean set of clothes first. Aren't you afraid of being rude? Jiang Pingji sent them out to change their clothes. Quick, call the doctor. Many of Niel Yang's confidants knew that his body was not well, and a small number of people had also seen some clues. However, he was extremely calm in front of others. This was the first time he had spat out blood and fainted in front of others. It would not take long for the news to spread throughout the camp. Niel Yang was furious this time. Even a normal person would be injured, let alone a patient like him. The doctor had used all his strength to save him, and had even used strong medicine to keep him alive. Seeing this, everyone broke out in a cold sweat for him. Do your best and leave it to the heavens. If he does not wake up tomorrow, I'm afraid. The white-haired and bearded doctor shook his head and sighed heavily. Everyone's heart sank when they saw this. After this torment, it was already late at night. The heavy rain had finally stopped, and the puddles on the ground were filled with rainwater. Nie Qingyi took care of the seriously ill Niel Yang, his eyes bloodshot. Nie Yang frowned when he saw this. He said sincerely, "Elder brother, uncle will definitely be able to turn this into safety." Nie Qing knelt by Niel Yang's bed, his face full of self-blame. He had learned of the situation at the front lines from the generals who had participated in the battle, and understood why his father had spat out blood after the rain. The heavens were on the enemy's side. A heavy rain had ruined Niel Yang's plans. How could he not be furious and spit out blood? Nie Yang said, "This matter is clearly Lu Shi's fault. Elder brother, why do you blame yourself? If uncle knew, he would definitely be displeased and scold you. How could a man be so indecisive?" Niel Yang vomiting blood. In the end it had nothing to do with Nie Qing. What was he blaming himself for? Nie Qing said, "I would rather father wake up and scold me, or ask for the family rules, than watch him struggle on the line between life and death." Nie Yang did not say anything else. He only stayed by Nie Qing's side silently. The system's cold sarcasm entered his ears. "Nie Qing must be extremely touched by you right now. It's a pity. Who would know that you were the main culprit who harmed Niel Yang?" Nie Yang did not show it on his face, but he laughed coldly in his heart. "Shut up. Why would the system listen?" Ever since it ruthlessly punished Nie Yang, their roles had been swapped. Chapter 1485. The matter of Niel Yang vomiting blood and fainting was suppressed by Wei Yong. Any soldier who dared to talk about it in private would be punished. After a series of harsh measures, the unstable morale of the army temporarily calmed down. But everyone knew that it was only temporary. There were 70,000 soldiers who participated in the battle during the day. These people had witnessed how the fire at Zhangjiang Pass started, and knew how the fire was extinguished. Even God did not give them face, and stood on the enemy's side. They were very flustered and worried about their future. Fighting with people was endless joy, but wasn't fighting with God courting death? That night, many people were so worried that they could not sleep well. Niel Yang also woke up in the early morning. He clearly felt that his body was much heavier than before, and he had no strength in his entire body. As soon as he turned his head, he saw his tired son lying on the side of the bed. Another person called Nie Yang was also lying on the side and sleeping soundly. "My lord is awake?" Wei Yong noticed that his lord was awake immediately, and his anxious mood instantly calmed down. Nie Yang used his eyes to signal Wei Yong to speak softly, so as not to wake Nie Qing. He closed his eyes and thought about the reason for his coma. He sighed and asked, "What was the situation after I fainted?" Wei Yong said, "There was no movement on Lu Shi's side. Some soldiers in the camp spread rumors and dealt with it immediately. The morale of the army could not be shaken. Once it was shaken, the war would not be easy to fight." Niel Yang said weakly, "Despite all the calculations, I didn't expect God to be on her side. She calculated the hearts of men, but she lacked a trace of God's will. After all, he was an ancient person. He did not know that the fire would heat up the air on the ground and cause it to expand and rise. He also did not know that the air above would contract and sink. The two would cause the water vapor in the air to condense into clouds and mist. Recently, the weather was about to rain. Niel Yang's fire only brought the rain forward. Not knowing this, Niel Yang would naturally attribute this coincidental rain to God's will like the others. Wei Yong said, "My lord, why do you say such depressing words? So what if it's God's will? Everything depends on human effort." Nie Liang smiled weakly. You're right. He had never been a person who believed in fate, but this coincidence made him crazy. My lord, please rest for a while. I will call the doctor over now. Niang was shrouded in a layer of haze, but Jiang Pingji, who was his opponent, could not cheer up. On the contrary, she flipped over the bronze table in anger. Bai Ning immediately stepped forward to plead for leniency. My lord, please calm your anger. This general thinks that there are many suspicious points in this matter. We might as well return and continue the interrogation. He had no choice but to stand up. His daughter, Bai Wuxia, was also involved in the leak of the carpentry workshop's secrets. He had never seen his lord so angry before. He was so scared that his liver trembled. Jiang Pengji suppressed her anger and did not continue tormenting the bronze table. Perhaps she would not have the chance to do so in the future. Why? The bronze table covered with his lord's handprints was bent in her rage. Aside from Bai Ning, there were also others who stood up to plead for Zhang Ping, Xiao Guang, and the others. Jiang Pingji's anger was too terrifying. They were really worried that their lord would order the execution of the three of them in a fit of anger. Why did he want to kill them? Because many of the carpentry workshop's secrets were leaked. Zhang Ping and the other two were implicated. Old Man Sun Wen wanted to say a few words to persuade Jiang Pingji to punish them lightly and spare their lives. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Wei Ci was as still as a mountain. He could not help but frown. Zhang Ping and Wei Ci were close friends. The former was in trouble, but the latter did not say anything. Either Wei Ci was clean and gave up on his friend Zhang Ping, refusing to plead for him and sully himself, or Wei Ci was confident that nothing would happen to Zhang Ping and the others. Sun Wen glanced at Qiguan Rang again, and found that he was also as calm as Mount Tai. He held his newly made feather fan and closed his eyes in deep thought. Well, it looked like it was the latter. That was the truth. Although Jiang Pingji was angry, she did not plan to do anything to Zhang Ping and the others, let alone order their execution. She calmed her anger and glanced at the messenger. She said, "Tell me everything in detail." The matter was simple. Because of Zhang Ping and the others' negligence, a spy had infiltrated the carpentry workshop. The spy had a photographic memory and had quietly stolen several confidential drawings from the carpentry workshop. For several years, no clues had been found. It was only recently that a flaw was revealed. The spy was ready to slip away. He found an excuse that his mother was sick and asked Zhang Ping for a 7-day leave to visit his family. However, the spy did not return after 7 days. Zhang Ping was worried and sent someone to check the spy's address. Only then did he find that the house was empty. If that was the case, he would at most be suspicious. However, Zhang Ping found a fragment of old and yellowed rice paper in a bird's nest near the house. Although the fragment was only a small corner, Zhang Ping could still recognize that it was part of the design of a new crossbow that had been developed a while ago. He immediately became suspicious and ordered people to search everywhere. Finally, they found a few relatively complete drawings in the house of a sluggard nearby. Chapter 1486. May fall in love with you. Oh no, the streamer hates betrayal the most, not to mention betraying her with a bunch of confidential drawings. Xiankyo. How is this betrayal? She has a boss, so she's a spy. If she doesn't care about her boss but works hard for the streamer instead, that's abnormal, isn't it? However, this operation is indeed disgusting. Although the salted fish were always complaining about Jiang Pingji's bad luck, if she really encountered something that didn't go her way, the salted fish were even more furious than she was. The streamer in front of them is their 5 million salted fish coach. No one can bully her except them. Tangled Pegasus. Sigh, am I the only one worried about Zhang Ping and the other two? Although this was done by a spy, they are also responsible for their negligence. The missing drawings are most likely a military secret. These charges are probably not easy to get away with. Because Zhang Ping and the others were technical geeks and engineering students, they rarely appeared in front of Jiang Pingji, and the salted fish rarely saw them. Even so, the salted fish still quite liked the three, and there were also spontaneously organized fan groups among the people. Zhang Ping and the others made a big mistake. and the salted fish could not help but feel worried for them. When Bai Ning and the others pleaded for mercy, some salted fish also echoed and pleaded for mercy. Some salted fish even suggested crowdfunding to reduce the punishment. However, a few salted fish bosses saw it clearly. Not to that extent. The charge of inadequate supervision can be serious or minor. It all depends on the streamer's choice. Zhang Ping and the others did not collude with the spy, and the streamer has been vigorously supporting technological research and development. She will most likely be lenient. While the salted fish argued endlessly, Jiang Pingji also made a statement. She fined Zhang Ping and the others a year's salary. It was a small punishment but a big warning. At the same time, she asked the three to reflect on their actions and settle the score when they returned. For three highly paid personnel, this little punishment was really just a drizzle. Bai Ning secretly heaved a sigh of relief and stopped pleading for his daughter, lest it backfire and make the Lord hate him. He changed the topic at the right time, and turned his gaze to the spy named Shizhong. He must catch him and punish him. Jiang Pengji said expressionlessly. How can it be so easy to catch him and punish him? We still don't know who Shizhong is working for. Even though Feng Jin, Su Ke, and the others had immediately sent troops to capture them, they were too late. The golden period had long passed. Because there was no progress in the pursuit, they could only quickly order the various checkpoints to pay attention to suspicious people. They would rather catch 1,000 wrongly than let one go. When Shizhong's news reached Jiang Pingji, there was no news of the spy anywhere. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Everyone could only speculate which faction Shizhong belonged to based on the clues left behind. Shizhong's case was very serious, but Jiang Pingji was at the front line. She had no extra energy to look for a needle in a haystack. After discussing for a while, everyone dispersed. Wuxia took a stroll outside and returned. Jiang Pingji said, "Aren't you burying your head in the sand? Apart from a few people with bad eyesight and a few people with no brains, who doesn't know that you and I have been in cahoots for a long time? If you go out for a spin and come back, it will give people the feeling that you're hiding something and make them suspicious." When Wuxia heard the words hooking up and committing adultery, he immediately felt that his lord needed to take up some cultural lessons. "I know that person called Shizhong." Wuxia coughed softly and briefly explained the reason for his visit. "What? You know him? Why didn't you say it just now?" Jiang Pingji knew the reason after thinking for a while. "It's inconvenient to say?" Wuxia knew him, but it was inconvenient to say it. The only explanation was that he knew Shizhong in his previous life. "It's indeed inconvenient. Although we don't have any interaction in this life, we met a few times in our previous life. I know a little." In this life, Wuxia and Shizhong did not have any interaction at all. He could not possibly use the excuse of calculating with his fingers and observing the sky at night to fool people. He continued, "Shizhong's ancestral home is in Zhongzhou Maozhou. Because of his inelegant appearance and short stature, he was rejected to become an official. In this era, one could not become an official just by having talent and background. It also depended on one's height, appearance, physical disability, and skin that was exposed. In short, if one did not look good, he would not be qualified to become an official. He could only be an ordinary person for the rest of his life. Even if there were other ways to become an official, he would most likely not be put in an important position. He would be mediocre for the rest of his life, and would not be able to stand out. Yes, the world that valued appearance was that cruel. As a member of the club that did not meet the standards for looks, Shizhong's experience was naturally bumpy. He first sought refuge with the local gentry family in Maozhou as a guest. Because he was ugly and had no ability, he sat on the bench for a year. They did not want to keep a freeloader, so they tactfully chased him away. Shizhong could only look for another family. Finally, under the recommendation of a friend, he entered the Wei family in Bianzhou and became a guest. The Wei family in Bianzhou? Isn't that the birthplace of your ancestral home? Wuxia nodded and replied, "My ancestor was indeed a branch of the Wei family in Bianzhou and finally settled in Langya County. However, the branch in Langya County moved back to Bianzhou 10 years ago in order to protect the descendants of the family. This is also a way out. In her previous life, Wuxia followed them to Zhongzhou at that time. In this life he rejected it and stayed in Langjie County with a few servants. Jiang Pingji nodded and did not interrupt. Wuxia continued. The Wei family in Bianzhou have many handsome men. With Shi Zhong's looks and talents, he became a guest under the Wei family. One can imagine his situation. Jiang Pingji looked at Wei Xi's face. She deeply agreed with the phrase, the Wei family has many handsome men. In that case, the person who sent him to be a spy is very likely to be your elder brother? Jiang Pingji remembered that the Wei family was considered a first-class gentry family in Bianzhou. A few years ago, the Wei family's status was not as high as it was now. They had no right to order the Wei family's guest to be a spy. After thinking about it, she found a possibility. Shi Zhong was sent by Wei Qiong. My lord's guess coincides with mine, Wuxia said. In fact, Shi Zhong was one of my elder brother's men in my previous life. Of course, Shi Zhong did not have the opportunity to be a spy in his previous life. When their emperor attacked Zhongzhou, Nie Liang had already knelt down. His elder brother Wei Qiong had been depressed for many years and passed away before he was 50. What abilities does Shi Zhong have? Wuxia smiled and said, he doesn't have many abilities. He just has a good memory, good handwriting, and looks honest on the outside. My elder brother in my previous life took a fancy to this. That's why he let Shi Zhong stay by his side to help organize the documents. Occasionally, he would write and correct some chores. Shi Zhong has never stood out in his life. His mother has a stubborn personality. She chased away a few daughters-in-law and insisted that her son marry a good one. Jiang Pingji frowned. Who did Shi Zhong marry in the end? Wuxia said, General Bai Ning's only daughter, Bai Yuexia. How can that be? I don't have much contact with Bai Yuexia, but I know that she has a strong temperament. How could she fall for such a person? Shi Zhong knew his colleague's secret and was ashamed and angry. He lost his composure and wanted to use domestic violence. As the daughter of a general, how could Bai Yuexia be at a disadvantage? On the contrary, it was Shi Zhong who was beaten black and blue by her, crying and wailing. After learning the whole story of her son's beating, Shi Zhong's mother secretly urged Bai Yuexia to resign from her position and stay at home to serve her husband and teach her son. Shi Zhong's mother pushed and fought, and Bai Yuexia had a miscarriage. She didn't know she was pregnant until she miscarried. Jiang Pingji said, in this world, other than blood-related men and married men, what man can't be a husband? She can actually tolerate it? Wuxia said, of course she didn't. Coincidentally, Her Majesty was implementing the one family, two household system. She used her official position to force Shi Zhong to agree. She originally wanted to register both children into her family and then prepare for a divorce. However, Shi Zhong and his mother refused to agree, and the law did not support Bai Yuexia's taking the two children, so she took her eldest daughter away. This daughter is very promising, but that son was raised to be useless. Bai Yuexia's eldest daughter was chosen to be the study companion of the crown prince, Jiang Yan. Looking at the relationship between the two children, they would definitely be the left and right arms of the young emperor in the future. Bai Yuexia's son was raised to be arrogant and willful by Shi Zhong and his mother. After Shi Zhong remarried, his wife maliciously praised him to death. When the child was 15 years old, he fought with others and rode a horse to race. He trampled 6 people to death and was finally sentenced to death. Jiang Pingji was not surprised. Shi Zhong and his mother are not good. How can they teach their child well under the influence of what they see and hear? Wuxia said, that child, I'm afraid his innate talent is not good. He takes after his father. Before Bai Yuexia divorced, she was the one who raised the child. Not long after the divorce, Bai Yuexia found out about her son's situation in the residence. She wanted to raise him, but unexpectedly, the child pointed his finger at his biological mother and insulted her, comparing her to a prostitute. Bai Yuexia was so angry that she completely gave up on this son and refused to acknowledge him anymore. Of course, in the end, she was the one who sent people to the market to collect her son's corpse. Their mother-son relationship was limited to that. Shi Zhong is really a bad person. After he separated from Bai Wuxia, he often referred to himself as the husband of the Minister of Works. Usually he would drink with his scoundrels and gossip about Bai Wuxia's private affairs. He often visited brothels and his mother slandered and insulted him everywhere. Officials were very concerned about their reputation. No matter what happened internally, their reputation must not be tainted on the surface. If Bai Wuxia was not trusted by Her Majesty, and she was usually cautious and reliable, she would probably be depressed by the imperial censor's criticism. Wuxia said, I thought that Bai Wuxia had long entered the Lord's tent and she would not meet Shizhong. I didn't expect to meet him in this way. Jiang Pengji said, maybe this is called fate. Even if it's fate, it's an ill-fated relationship. Wuxia sighed. Compared to Shizhong, I think Shihing is better. It's a pity that Shihing has worked with her for several years, but they still address each other as colleagues. There doesn't seem to be any romantic feelings between them. If the two of them can get married, it will be perfect. Zhang Ping was fated to have a plum wife and a crane son in his previous life. This was also his pursuit, so Wuxia could not persuade him otherwise. In this life, he saw that Zhang Ping's obsession with being single for the rest of his life was not very deep. Perhaps there was a chance. Jiang Pengji said, if you were an iceman, I'm afraid you would starve to death. Wuxia asked, why? Jiang Pengji said, matchmaking is also a skill. How can I mess around like you? Wuxia held back his laughter and said, I hope that my lord can point out the right path. Jiang Pengji said as if she had been through it. To deal with this kind of situation, you should get straight to the point. Don't pretend to be ambiguous. Ask them what their impression of each other is, and whether they are willing to lie in the same coffin after 100 years. Won't that solve the problem? Wuxia was speechless. Wasn't this too simple and crude? I'll go back and try. Maybe I can be a matchmaker. I haven't been to a wedding for a long time. Jiang Pengji hesitated for a while and said, wait. Why do you want to matchmake Shihing and Wuxia, and not someone else? It's not that I'm biased, but Shihing has a dignified appearance. If he has the intention to get married, I'm afraid that his family's doorstep will be flattened by icemen. The possibility of him choosing Wuxia doesn't seem high? Wuxia held back his laughter and said, Shihing doesn't rely on a face to distinguish beauty from ugliness, he relies on his hands. Because of this strange illness, others thought that Zhang Ping was arrogant and difficult to get along with. Wuxia was one of the few friends he had. He took the initiative to get to know Wuxia, only because he had a pair of hands that made people fall in love at first sight. Chapter 1488. So he's face-blind. Based on his situation, it's indeed difficult for him to find someone he likes. After all, no one knew what kind of hands Zhang Ping liked. No matter how good-looking Wuxi's hands were, they belonged to someone. They couldn't give them away. Wuxi said, My lord, why don't you send someone to guard the mountains near Zhanjiang Pass? Maybe there will be some gains. Since Shizhong was sent by Wuxi's elder brother, Wei Dan, he would definitely find a way to hand the things over to Wei Dan after stealing the secrets. At this time, Wei Dan was in the Nye camp outside the pass. Shizhong would definitely not go far. He would most likely cross the border nearby and sneak in. Jiang Pengji nodded. I understand. Later, send someone to guard and arrest any suspicious people. Since the end of the siege, the troops of the two armies had not moved. Nie Liang needed to recuperate, and Jiang Pengji needed to reorganize the troops. She counted with her fingers. The supplies sent by the logistics were almost here. Time passed in a flash. The new episode of Dream of 1,000 Years began the lucky draw. The 5 million salted fish rubbed their hands excitedly. Yinrian. Make another wish. I'm willing to exchange 15 pounds of meat for a dream of 1,000 years! Tongmeng. I also make a wish. I'm willing to exchange Tang Qi for a dream of 1,000 years! Fuduoduo. Choose me, choose me. I woke up early today to go to Jinshan Temple to pray. I'm very devout. Looking at the screen full of prayers and metaphysics, Jiang Pengji sighed and pressed the lucky draw button. Countless salted fish IDs flashed in the center of the screen. After a minute, There was a beep. The lucky emperor was born. Lan Chui Yubuja. Me. It's actually me. I'm so lucky. Goodbye, I'm going to cross over. The lucky emperor was so excited that he was incoherent. The other salted fish felt sour in their hearts and roared angrily. Bah! Because of the previous lucky emperor's strategy posts, the salted fish were seriously prepared, regardless of whether they were lucky enough to cross over. Maybe one day they would be lucky enough to cross over. The new lucky emperor happily ran to her Simon's bed. She did not take off her clothes or shoes. She lay flat on the bed and closed her eyes. Not long after, she felt a sense of weightlessness, as if she had flown into the sky. When she opened her eyes, the scenery around her had changed greatly. She was not lying on a spring mattress, but wild grass and gravel. No way, so unlucky. A slightly deep male voice escaped from his throat, scaring her into covering her mouth. After a while, she carefully moved her other hand down to his Adam's apple, and then down to his flat chest. She continued to move down, and her face turned red as she let go of her hand. Oh my, not only did he come to the wilderness, he even turned into a man. She mumbled as she looked around and found a screen floating in the air. The screen was filled with comments from the salted fish. Since she had read the previous European Emperor's Guide, she accepted it very well and did not make a fuss about it. Hi everyone. Baby is the new lucky king. Acting cute, #carrot. Carrot hashtag. Unexpectedly, the salted fishes didn't buy it at all. They all sent vomiting emojis. Tudo feitio. Find a puddle and look at yourself. Don't act cute if your looks aren't good enough. It hurts my eyes. Jinging. It's not too ugly, but it's below the standard of a normal person. The killing power of acting cute is comparable to Sister Feng who just debuted. The salted fishes chatted one after another. The European emperor couldn't help but raise his hand to touch his face and look for a puddle. Ah, I was scared to death. She was so scared that she half squatted and jumped to the side. This is deep in the forest. My luck is too bad. Do I have to stay here for the precious 12 hours? It had been raining heavily outside, and the man's clothes were wet. His face looked sickly, and it was obvious that he had been sick. She turned around and carried the man's luggage and bookcase on her back, so that the original owner wouldn't wake up and find his belongings gone. As a good baby who had grown up in the new era, she couldn't cause trouble for others even if she had transmigrated. I've transmigrated. I can't go back without even seeing an ancient person. That's too much. She cheered herself on. In order to reduce her fear, she forced herself to think of messy things. For example, she started to run wildly while walking. You guys don't know that before I transmigrated, I was an A-cup, so I didn't know how painful it was for a girl with big boobs to run 800 meters. Later, my childhood friend told me that if a man ran naked, it would be painful. Now I've finally experienced it. The ancient people really didn't have underwear. The thing between their legs swung when they ran, and the faster they ran, the more painful it was. Tong Tong's girl. You're indeed an old lady. I admit defeat. With the salted fishes joking around, the European emperor was not very afraid, but that was all. Not long after, Jiang Pingji sent a bullet screen. Don't go forward. Stop and step back. There are snakes in front. Oh my. The European emperor was so scared that her whole body trembled. She was most afraid of snakes. She took a closer look and saw a few snakes coiled on the tree in front of her. She stepped back carefully and was so scared that tears came out of her eyes. The system considerately gave her an electronic map. The red dots on it meant that there were dangerous beasts. The European emperor only needed to put her hand on the red dots to see the species of the beasts. A rough scan showed that 70% of them were snakes. The density of snakes in the wild was too high, wasn't it? But it made sense. In her era, the number of humans had skyrocketed, squeezing too much living space. Snakes had no habitat, so it was a problem for them to reproduce and survive. It was different in ancient times. The number of humans was small, and there were many habitats in the wild. Snakes could restrain humans, so the density was naturally high. Careful to avoid dangerous creatures, she climbed down the mountain, stumbling. She didn't know if the man climbed over the mountain and wanted to go down, or if he had just climbed a few dozen meters. Anyway, she refused to stay in the forest with wild beasts. After spending more than an hour, she finally went down the mountain. Oh my, there's smoke over there. It's almost noon. She could vaguely see smoke rising from the horizon, and she could vaguely see the outline of some buildings. Her heart was moved. She opened her arms and hugged the sky. She felt better than ever. Jiang Pingji was speechless. Wait a minute. The environment that this lucky emperor was in seemed a little familiar. At that moment, Jiang Pingji felt that the camp was boring. She randomly found an excuse to patrol the camp, and the two of them took a walk on horseback. Of course, to ensure safety, there were hundreds of guards following behind them. While they were chatting, they paid attention to the European emperor in the streaming room, in case the child was stopped by the poisonous snakes. Little Erlang, carry your school bag to school. The European emperor hummed a nursery rhyme, and found a white horse and a red dress reflected on the stream not far away. Because this body was short-sighted, she couldn't see very clearly. Who is it? Accompanied by the pleasant and somewhat familiar male voice, she heard the sound of a sharp sword being unsheathed. She panicked. In the blink of an eye, the sharp sword in Wei Xi's hand was already against her neck. Xia. Beauty Xi? Oh my, she won the lottery. Chapter 1489. Beauty Xi? Wei Xi did not know if she was referring to him, but just the word beauty was enough to make him angry. No matter how well-mannered Wei Xi was, he could not hold it in any longer. He angrily rebuked, Lecher. De-lecher? The salted fish Lucky King could not help but exclaim. Even scolding people sounds so nice. Jiang Pingji knew very well that even though she said that Wei Xi's martial arts skills were at the level of a small class of square dancers, it was not a problem for him to deal with an empty-handed salted fish who was obsessed with beauty. If salted fish was allowed to do as he pleased, Wei Xi might not be able to hold back and stab someone to death. Zixiao, what's wrong? Jiang Pingji clamped the horse's abdomen and walked forward leisurely. White snorted and did as she said. It looked extremely docile. Hearing these words, the salted fish Lucky King could not help but look at the newcomer. Because she was short-sighted, she couldn't see clearly at first. She only saw a red shadow on a white horse approaching her. When the other party arrived in front of her, four words suddenly popped up in her mind. Fresh clothes and furious horses. The woman on the back of the horse was dressed in red, and there was a faint smile on her handsome face. The white horse she was riding on was snow white from head to toe, and there was not a single flaw on it. The salted fish European king stood rooted to the ground. He stared at the screen for a long time, and his brain froze for a moment. Unbeknownst to him, the live stream was already bursting at the seams. Countless unlucky people were wailing in anguish, passionately portraying what it meant to be envious, jealous, and hateful. Tudufecio. This is a historic moment. I never thought that salted fish would have the chance to be in the same frame as the host. Yiwu Yanling. I'm so jealous. Why is it that when I transmigrated, I was so far away from the host, but when she transmigrated, she had the opportunity to meet the host couple? It was heartbreaking enough to see the guy who ate by rubbing his feet, but he didn't expect this guy to be the real deal. Guikai Guofeng Xiao. Did you guys notice that each time I transmigrated, the luckier one by one? Does this mean that the next time I transmigrate, I will have the chance to collect all the illustrated achievements, get the signatures of all the members, and walk to the peak of life with antiques in my pocket? Kojiao Qifan. Wash up and go to sleep. Everything is possible in daydreams. While the salted fishes were boiling with excitement, the target of their envy was facing a test of life and death. Wei Xi's hand that was holding the sword was very steady. The salted fish Lucky Queen did not dare to move, for fear that the other party's hand would slip and stab her. Big brother, let's sit down and talk. Don't play around with weapons. That's not in line with the core values of socialism. The salted fish Lucky Emperor knew his place. He knew that his address just now had offended Wei Xi, so he could only change the way he addressed Wei Xi with tears in his eyes. Wei Xi did not listen to her explanation, and answered Jiang Pingji's question. My lord, this person's behavior is impetuous, his words are frivolous, and his actions are also suspicious. Why don't we bring him down for interrogation? The salted fish Lucky King could not help but shed 2 streams of tears. I've been a fan of you for so many years. As my idol, you actually treat your fans like this. Sad Qaq Jiang Pengji dismounted from the horse and resisted the urge to smile. Forget it. He looks like a hunter who lives a hard life. Put away your sword first. Look, he's so scared that he's about to cry. Wei Xi did as he was told and skillfully sheathed the snow-white sword. When the salted fish Lucky Queen saw this, she secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. She decided to take back her label of Wei Xi as a weakling. Who are you? Jiang Pingji asked with a pleasant expression. The salted fish Lucky Queen's eyes darted around. When she saw the system's notification, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. I'm a hunter from the nearby mountains. Greetings, my lord. She stuttered as she spoke. Her posture of cupping her fists was also very awkward. Instead, she portrayed the image of a hunter who had not seen the world. Wei Xi glanced at the books and luggage that she was carrying and said indifferently, a bunch of nonsense. This person's image was quite in line with the image of a hunter, but the things that he was carrying were not what a hunter should have. The salted fish Lucky Queen looked at Wei Xi with a wronged expression. She was answering according to the system's notification. Could it be that the system was making fun of her? Wei Xi asked. You said that you're a hunter. Then whose things do you have on you belong to? When the salted fish Lucky Queen heard Wei Xi's question, she suddenly had the illusion that her heart was beating 70 beats per minute. If Jiang Pingji was not by her side, she really wanted to pounce on Wei Xi and hug him. Even if she would be stabbed a few times by the other party, it would be worth it. Even if she died under a peony flower, she would still be a romantic ghost. I have these things. The salted fish Lucky Queen could not help but glance at the system's notification. After she saw it clearly, she almost cursed it out loud. At the same time, she blamed herself for being careless. Why? Because the luggage did not belong to this body at all. I picked up these luggage. The salted fish Lucky Queen stuttered. Her entire face looked even more aggrieved and pitiful, as if she was about to cry in the next second. I really picked them up. I saw that the luggage was on the ground and no one wanted it, so I took it. However, Wei Xi said, picked up? There were not many households near Zhanjiang Pass. After the war started, the evacuation of the people was hastened. Now that it's in the wilderness, where did you pick up these things? Could it be that the nearby bandits were tempted by the wealth and killed to steal it? The salted fish Lucky Queen watched as Wei Xi placed his right hand on the hilt of his sword. Her legs turned to jelly. Why did Beauty Xi guess so accurately? Yes, this body was actually a bandit who made a living by robbing people. There were 6 other accomplices. Since the war started at Zhanjiang Pass, the 6 accomplices were afraid of Jiang Pingji's power and influence. They secretly moved to another place. Only this body could not leave because it had to take care of its elderly mother. Because there were no passers-by, the bandit had a hard time. He did not make any business for a few days. Yesterday he met a sloppy refugee. He followed him with a hatchet in his hand. It happened to be raining heavily. The bandit and the refugee were fighting. He thought that he could kill the person in a few moves. He did not expect the other party to be so stubborn that he would rather die than let go. In desperation, the bandit chopped randomly with the hatchet a few times. The heavy rain quickly calmed his feverish mind. He realized that it was very likely that he had killed someone. He was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He turned to escape. The mountain road was rugged, and it was raining heavily. The bandit lost his footing and rolled down the mountain. When he woke up the next day, he had already become the salted fish Lucky Queen. The system gave a brief introduction, but the salted fish Lucky Queen only saw that the body was that of a bandit. She killed someone. Wei Xi used a sword to scare her. She shivered and confessed everything. Wei Xi's face was livid. Jiang Pingji, who was standing 2 steps away from him, secretly facepalmed. She was sure that the salted fish Lucky Queen was a good girl. She would confess whatever Wei Xi lied to her. In a more complicated environment, she would not survive more than 2 episodes. Jiang Pingji even covered up for her, and said that she was a hunter who lived nearby. So, you really killed someone to steal their wealth? Wei Si's left thumb pushed against the sword's guard. The snow-white blade was slightly unsheathed. Jiang Pingji said coldly, "You can't hug me when he's not here." "Why? Ugly reject. Salted fish lucky king. Ing." While they were talking, Wei Si walked over in a hurry, seeming to have lost his composure. In his hands were a few pieces of fine silk cloth. "Master, look." Wei Si handed the cloth to Jiang Pingji. She took it and unfolded it. She frowned slightly. On it was a drawing of the woodworking workshop's top secret. She gestured at salted fish with her peripheral vision and asked Wei Si, "Shizhong?" Wei Si shook his head. This person is definitely not Shizhong. He didn't have much interaction with Shizhong in his previous life, but he had met him twice in a hurry. If salted fish European king's body was really Shizhong's, there was no reason that Wei Si couldn't recognize him the first time they met. In that case, the refugee he robbed last night was Shizhong? Jiang Pingji suddenly didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The possibility of this guess is very high, Wei Si said calmly. Shizhong didn't have such experience in the past. Zhanjiang Pass is located at the border between the two countries. The atmosphere is chaotic and bandits are everywhere. He avoided detection and tried to cross the mountain. It's hard to guarantee that he won't encounter bandits who block the road and rob him. In the previous life and this life, everyone's fate had changed greatly. Shizhong was still as unlucky as ever. Jiang Pingji said, "Send someone to search the mountain. I want to see him alive or dead." Regardless of whether Shizhong was truly loyal to her, he had worked under her for a few years. Wasn't it a betrayal to betray his master now? She could tolerate the shortcomings of her subordinates, but she couldn't tolerate her subordinates betraying her. Traitors had to die. "It's best if he's alive. I'll kill him myself." Salted fish European king interrupted and asked her, "What if he's dead?" "Whip the corpse. You have a heavy taste." Wei Si's face darkened and he scolded, "Don't be rude." Salted fish European king immediately became as quiet as a quail. She didn't even dare to look around. The real beauty Ci was very different from the gentle gentleman she imagined. She felt pressured. Jiang Pingji heard her ridicule and laughed. "Do you know? This is the difference between the original and my peers." Incisive. Salted fish gave Jiang Pingji a thumbs up. Human nature was complicated. People would show different faces to different people. Wei Si was no exception. To friends he was talkative and considerate. To outsiders he was elegant and dignified. To his lord, he was loyal and devoted. To those who offended his lord, he naturally had a stern and angry side. The Wei Si in Salted Fish's mind was based on the Wei Si she saw in the streaming room. Naturally, it was different from reality. Wei Si sent someone to search for Shizhong's corpse, but after searching the mountain, they only found a pool of blood and drops of blood scattered intermittently along the way. Shizhong wasn't hacked to death last night. After waking up, he hastily treated his wounds and left. Looking at the time, he's most likely at the Nye camp. Wei Si said, "When I sent people to search the mountain, the soldiers reported that there were obvious footprints nearby. The number of people was between 15 to 20. This group of people seemed to be looking for something, but they returned home when they couldn't find it. I boldly guessed that this group of people was led here by Shizhong? Most likely so." Jiang Pingji silently calculated the time in her heart and roughly reconstructed the process. The bandits slashed Shizhong randomly and thought that he was dead. In a hurry, they ran and fell down the mountain. In fact, Shizhong only fainted. When Shizhong woke up, he knew that he couldn't snatch the things from the bandits alone. He could only continue to climb the mountain and seek refuge in the Nye camp. Then he would bring people to look for the bandits. Unexpectedly, the bandits were transmigrated by Lucky King. Lucky King mistakenly thought that the stolen things belonged to the bandits and brought them down the mountain. If Lucky King didn't transmigrate or didn't take the things, these things would have been taken back by Shizhong. This speculation made sense. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, In that case, this bandit did a good deed? Salted Lucky King rushed to say. Does this count as me atoning for my crime? Wei Xi was non-committal. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to ask. You can say so. Do you have any wishes? Salted Lucky King's nerves were tense and she suppressed her wildly beating heart. She had to think carefully about what she wanted. There was only one chance, so she couldn't make a hasty decision. After thinking about it, Salted Lucky King realized that she was also a greedy person. She actually wanted everything. In the end, she asked for everyone's autographs. Jiang Pingji took the initiative to give her a set of fashionable headwear for women. I saw the bullet screen earlier. You seem to have mentioned that you're getting married soon. This is my gift. Salted Lucky King was stunned on the spot. Her cheeks were fluttering red. Chapter 1491. Thank you. The Lucky Queen suddenly became shy. She felt that it was the best gift she had ever received in her life. It made the wedding meaningful. I wanted to have a Western-style wedding, but I've changed my mind. How am I supposed to send you the wedding photos? I don't think so, Jiang Pingji said frankly. However, even if there are no wedding photos, I think you're definitely a very beautiful girl. You'll be the most beautiful bride on your wedding day. Also, I have to apologize to you for what happened to Zixiao. His behavior just now was due to his cautiousness and his protection of me. If he offended you, please don't take it to heart and forgive him. The Salted Lucky Queen blushed. She covered her face with her hands and said shyly, Actually, it was my fault. I should be the one apologizing to Wei Xi. After all, that title was offensive to him. Nothing has happened yet and I'm not hurt. Streamer, I realize that you're better than I thought. If not for the fact that you're a girl, I really want to replace the groom. The last sentence was what she wanted to say. The streamer was warm, flirtatious, handsome, beautiful, and responsible. Fortunately, she was a girl. If she was a guy, she would really want to kick her fiancé. I've heard similar words many times before. Jiang Pingji laughed involuntarily. Fortunately, I can fight. Otherwise, I would have been beaten to death by the group. You don't have enough charm, but you still beat your rival in love. Isn't this indirectly admitting that you're inferior to your rival in love? The Salted Lucky Queen shook her head. After a while, she changed the topic. I suddenly thought of something. Others will be jealous of you for giving me such a precious gift. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen in the streaming room and told the salted fish with a heavy expression. They're making a scene. All of them are envious, jealous, and hateful. Some even plan to send you a knife. The Salted Lucky Queen was very optimistic. This is great. I can open a knife shop without having to purchase goods. Jiang Pingji had a very good impression of the optimistic salted fish. However, because of her identity, she could not pay too much attention to him. Jiang Pingji ordered someone to prepare a delicious meal for the salted fish. She calculated the time, and it was time to go back after she finished eating. The food in the army was not very good, but the salted fish European king still finished his meal. He returned to his own world with a set of accessories and gifts from his idols. Jiang Pingji didn't have the energy to care about how salted fish was doing at the moment. How is Shizhong's memory? Since he has a photographic memory, even if he doesn't have the blueprint, he should be able to write it down, right? Although they had recovered the blueprint, Shizhong had run back to the Nye camp. Leaving this person alive would ultimately be a scourge. You don't have to worry too much about this. Let's not talk about whether or not Shizhong can restore the contents of the blueprint. Even if he can, how long will it take to mass-produce them? CI had just sent someone to interrogate the robber, and the robber confessed everything out of fear. He said that he had cut Shizhong's hand, cheek, collarbone, and shoulder. With such injuries, even if he didn't die, he would still be half dead. If the injuries were any deeper, it was difficult for him to even hold a brush. So how could he draw a fine picture? Jiang Pingji felt better after hearing that. On second thought, she was suddenly curious about Niel Yang's reaction. Shizhong, the chess piece, was completely useless. He went for wool and came home shorn. Even if Shizhong wasn't sent by Niel Yang, he was most likely very depressed. Just as Jiang Pingji had guessed, Nieliang was indeed very depressed at the moment. If he hadn't restrained his temper, he would probably have flown into a rage. Wei Yong said apologetically, "I didn't do my job well. If I had been more cautious and sent someone to receive him earlier, perhaps." Nieliang interrupted him and sighed in his heart. "Forget it. Even God is helping Lu Shi. What can we do?" Shi Zhong didn't meet anyone who was pursuing him along the way, but he just had to meet a robber when he was crossing the mountain. I have to say, maybe this is fate. When luck was good, everything went smoothly. When luck was bad, even a sip of herbal tea would get stuck in one's teeth. Wei Yong blamed himself incessantly. This matter was his fault. If he had been more cautious and sent someone to receive Shi Zhong, it might have been a different situation. Nieliang asked again, "How is Shi Zhong's injury now?" He remembered that Zishun had said that Shi Zhong had a photographic memory. It didn't matter if the drawing was lost. He could still write it down if he was alive. Wei Yong sighed softly. "Not very good. The military doctor said that his right hand was cut by a hatchet. He won't be able to write for a while. The wound on his cheek is too deep. His left eye can't be saved. The wound on his left shoulder has spread to his collarbone. It's not easy to heal and it's very easy to rupture." It had to be said that it was a miracle that Shi Zhong could come back alive. He had the heart but not the strength for other matters. Nieliang was silent for a long time. However, the two of them didn't know Shi Zhong's determination to climb up. If he couldn't write with his right hand, he would use his left hand. If his left eye was blind, he would only keep his right eye open. If he couldn't move the wound on his shoulder, he would lie down and draw. He had endured humiliation for so many years before he finally got the perfect opportunity to be promoted. How could he give up halfway? In fact, during the years he was undercover in the woodworking workshop, he had thought of defecting. However, the idea didn't last long. After all, the woodworking workshop was a low-level government office. Even if Jiang Pingji attached great importance to it, the people inside almost didn't participate in politics. Zhang Ping, one of the three heads of the woodworking workshop, had worked there for 2 years, but that was because Jiang Pingji was short of talents. Zhang Ping and the others enjoyed excellent treatment, but they didn't have any real power. Or rather, the woodworking workshop was a department that didn't have any power. If Shi Zhong stayed there, no matter how hard he tried, he could only climb to the position of Zhang Ping and the others. Without real power, what was the point of having a high position? However, Shi Zhong was right-handed. He couldn't use his left hand to write. How could he draw exquisite and detailed drawings? He didn't make any progress for a few days. At that moment, Jiang Pingji had finished reorganizing. Several batches of supplies arrived one after another. It's not a solution to always be in a deadlock. We have to find a way to break through, Qiguanrang said. Nieliang refused to accept the challenge for several days. This is the 4th time he has put up a no-challenge sign. Even though Nieliang had put up a no-challenge sign, Jiang Pingji could still fight if she wanted to. However, they were holed up in the camp. There were more than 200,000 troops in the camp. Jiang Pingji still had to defend Zhanjiang Pass. It was impossible for her to attack with all her might. Therefore, she could only watch helplessly when they put up a no-challenge sign. There are only 2 ways to deal with such a situation. First, find trouble with them. Second, if there's no trouble, then create trouble. Qiguanrang glanced at his lord from the corner of his eyes. She was the one with the most crooked ideas. Someone suggested, "Why don't we try to lead the troops to attack at night?" Jiang Pingji said. 1,000 people to sneak attack a camp with more than 200,000 troops? If we can't hurt them, we can only let them have a good dream. This idea was too bad. However, let them have a good dream? Nieliang was now a patient. He probably couldn't stand the torment. Bai Ning said, "I have an idea." Jiang Pingji said, "Tell me about it." Chapter 1492. Bai Ning wasn't the only one who wanted to make a contribution. The 5 million salted fish in the streaming room also wanted to join in. Pulsation activation. Come up with a plan to build up your character and beg for an adventure called Dream of 1,000 Years. I want to be a top scholar. After searching for a long time, I suddenly saw the content of General Tian Dan of Qi setting up the Flaming Bull formation during the Warring States period. I think it's possible. Does the streamer want to get 1,000 bulls to give it a try? Tie a knife to the bull's horns, tie hay to their tails and ignite it, then charge at the enemy's camp. Tudufecio. Save it, don't come up with a bad idea. If you want to use this idea to build up your character, I'm afraid you won't have any adventure in your next life. The big boss is a big boss. He has the demeanor of a master when he speaks. Guekai guo fengxiu. The Flaming Bull formation sounds awesome, but it's actually very unlikely. If I remember correctly, during the Civil War before the founding of the People's Republic, both parties tried the Flaming Bull formation, but it didn't work because the frightened bulls wouldn't charge at the enemy. Tie a knife to a bull's horn? Be careful not to stab your own people. The Flaming Bull formation? It's better to make a bull formation. It's more feasible. After all, animals can't understand human language, and it's impossible for them to obey orders like soldiers. Although there are records of the Flaming Bull formation in history, history can't be completely trusted. The practical difficulty has to be considered. If one plan doesn't work, another plan comes up. Shulijiqiu. If the Flaming Bull formation doesn't work, then we can learn from Wife Chow and attack Crow's Nest at night in the classic Battle of Guandu. The streamer sends troops to attack their logistics granary. As long as they burn all their food, the battle will be easy. In Yuejia Zhugachinma. Hihi, do you know where Niel Yang's logistics granary is? The salted fish are so eager to come up with a plan, only because Jiang Pingji's gift to the lucky emperor made them collectively explode. That lucky emperor was extremely lucky. If he had the treatment of a 5 million lottery winner, the other lucky emperors only had $5 at most. It's infuriating to compare. The lucky emperor hasn't held a wedding yet, but he's already released his wedding photos online. He spent a high price to buy custom-made fabric and hired a professional tailor to customize his wedding dress. It's a perfect imitation of Lu Zhao's wedding dress. There are more than 20 pieces of headgear scattered. When he wears all of them and puts on his wedding dress and makeup, everyone is envious. The Lucky King added another sentence. This will be a family heirloom in the future. It will be passed down to the daughter and not the son. I hope that the daughter in the future will also be beautiful. The European emperor posted a photo of the salted fish downstairs acknowledging his mother-in-law. Because of this lucky emperor's fortuitous encounter, the salted fish were even more enthusiastic about Dream of 1,000 Years. It was unknown who said that speaking more in the live broadcast room could increase the chance of winning a prize, but the number of bullet screens had doubled in the past few days. The salted fishes tried their best to come up with suggestions, but Jiang Pingji did not accept any of them. Bai Ning's suggestions were somewhat feasible. Everyone discussed and came up with a rough battle plan. As the saying goes, if the mountain is not me, then I will be the mountain. So what if Nieliang keeps hiding? Since a frontal battle during the day would not be able to inflict serious damage on them, they could only try to do so at night. Jiang Pingji had initially rejected the idea of attacking at night, but after Bai Ning's improvement, attacking at night was not a bad idea. As everyone knew, before Bai Ning followed Jiang Pingji, he was in the firecracker business. His ancestral skills were very reliable. Therefore, that night, the Nya camp was still peaceful. The patrolling soldiers handed over their shifts as usual. The bonfire outside the camp occasionally made 1 or 2 crackles. Because Nieliang was not feeling well, Nye Qing took the initiative to take on the trivial military affairs. He tried his best to help his father share the burden. Occasionally, he would ask his father-in-law, Wei Dan, for help when there was something he did not understand. With Wei Dan's careful guidance, Nye Qing was a smart person who could understand with a little guidance. He quickly got the hang of it. He was busy, but Nye Yang was still idle. I really don't know what you're afraid of. Do you really not trust me? Nye Qing knew the reason why Nye Yang was unwilling to get involved in military affairs. It was because Nye Yang was the legitimate grandson of the third branch. Nye Liang, who was in power in the Nye family, was the eldest legitimate son of the fifth branch. Nye Yang was worried that if he got involved in too much military power, he would arouse Nye Liang's suspicion and dislike. After all, the internal conflicts in the Nye family were quite deep. Old Master Nye refused to admit his old age. Everyone felt that they were qualified to be in charge of the Nye family, so they disliked each other. Thinking of this, Nye Qing could not help but chuckle. Although he and Nye Yang were cousins, their relationship was better than that of real brothers. How could he be so suspicious of his own brother? Nye Yang lazily turned over. He said, "That's not it. This little brother is mediocre and untalented. It's better not to cause trouble for elder brother." Nye Qing moved the lamp closer and struggled to read through the scrolls with slightly sore eyes. When he finished processing a batch, he saw Nye Yang finish 2 plates of pastries from the corner of his eye. He shook his head helplessly. "Don't eat too much at night. It's easy to get indigestion and nausea. How old are you? You don't even notice this." Nye Qing was about to nag again. Nye Yang's heart thumped. He mentally prepared himself to be chanted. Nye Qing was good, but he was too involved. This made him feel uncomfortable. As they spoke, a burst of hurried footsteps came from outside the tent. Reporting, Nye Qing said, "What is it?" The messenger said, "Enemy figures have been discovered in the southeast barracks." In an instant, the words "night attack" appeared in Nye Qing and Nye Qing's minds. "Send orders everywhere to guard against the enemy." Nye Qing asked again, "How many enemies are there?" Of course, the messenger did not know. However, he was sure that the enemy was not large. There were no more than 1,000 of them. A night attack of 1,000 was not enough for the Nye camp, which had more than 200,000 soldiers. What can 1,000 men do? Not to mention that they were discovered by our army. Rather than saying it was a night attack, it's more like seeking death. Nye Yang pretended to analyze in surprise. He then guessed, "Elder brother, maybe the enemy has other troops. Are they trying to create a diversion?" Even though he hated the system to the core, he had to admit that having such a thing was equivalent to having a clairvoyant and clairvoyant. According to the feedback from the system, the enemy had 3,000 men. They were split into 3 groups of 1,000 men each. The troop that the messenger reported might have been a fog bomb to attract their attention. The enemy still had a backup plan. Nye Qing said solemnly, "This matter needs to be reported immediately. We cannot delay it." He had just stepped out of the tent when he noticed a fire burning in a certain direction. The enemy had attacked? Before he could finish thinking, there was a series of firecrackers exploding in another direction. As if to cater to these 2 changes, there was another ambush. The enemy shot hundreds of fire arrows into the Nye camp. When Wei Yong heard the news, he was so angry he almost cursed. What are the night patrols doing? How is it that the enemy is less than 50 zhang away from the camp, without being discovered? The range of arrows was limited. Even the longer-range crossbows had to be close enough to shoot the fire arrows into the camp. Wei Yong wanted to vomit blood, but he did not discover them at such a close distance. The soldiers guarding the perimeter of the camp also felt wronged. Chapter 1493. Although it was called a night attack, it was actually a harassment from time to time. They would make a big fuss about an imminent attack, and when the enemy sent reinforcements, the soldiers would slip away quietly. What was this like? It was like a long foreplay was done, and there was a feeling, but it ended up withering. They did not just harass once, but 5 or 6 times in one night. It was not until the sky was faintly gray that the enemy returned home. That night, almost no one in the Nye camp could sleep well. It was not because of the large number of enemies, but because the enemy was too elusive. Every time they appeared, there would be no warning, and the moment they appeared, they would launch a wave of rockets. However, the people of the Nye camp did not dare to let down their guard. Who knew if this teasing would be real next time? The next day, the sky was bright, and rumors were flying among the soldiers. "You slept like a log last night, and you don't know what happened. Lu Shi's army suddenly appeared out of thin air, and when we caught up, they disappeared again. Not long after, they appeared in another place. Could it be that these people are celestial soldiers and generals? That's strange." When the soldiers ate, they gathered together and whispered, not daring to speak loudly. The Nye camp was strict in managing the army, and any speech that shook the morale of the soldiers was not allowed. Once caught, the lightest punishment would be a lesson, and the heaviest punishment would be military law to warn others. No one disliked their long lives, and under normal circumstances, they did not dare to talk about it everywhere. However, what happened yesterday was too strange. While the soldiers were anxious, they urgently needed a sense of security from their comrades, so there were soldiers whispering about it everywhere. Maybe they really are celestial soldiers and generals. I just heard someone say that they saw them flying down from the sky with their own eyes. No, they clearly came out from the ground. I heard that Luxi's men are all ghost soldiers. Rumors always became more and more exaggerated as they spread. With each additional person, the rumor would become less true. At first, people were still talking about the strange appearance of the enemy last night, but as the rumors spread, it became that the enemy flew down from the sky, drilled out from the ground, and the enemy who attacked at night were all ghost soldiers. What was even more amazing was that there were actually a few people who swore that they saw it with their own eyes. Not only did some people see it with their own eyes, but some people also found supporting evidence. If Luxi wasn't the King Yanluo of Hell, why would she be so bloodthirsty? I heard that every time she returned from a great victory, she would have thousands of human ears strung around her waist and human heads on her horse's back. Every day, she drinks human blood and eats human flesh. Wherever she goes, she kills. Isn't she a living Hades? No, it's not King Yanluo. It's most likely a general in the sky. Say, the last time the Lord went to burn Zhangjiang Pass, the fire was clearly so big that it couldn't be put out, but the heavens actually rained. It's most likely a general who went to look for the Dragon King. That's why it rained. Some said that Jiang Pingji was a general with a powerful background in the heavenly palace, while others said that she was a Rakshasa demon from hell. Otherwise, why would the enemy appear without a sound last night, and leave without a trace? Who in this world could do this? It was either a god or a ghost. At noon, these messy rumors reached Nieliang's ears, and Wei Yong and the others all apologized. They also dealt with the few who spread the worst rumors and managed to suppress the signs, but it was better to disperse them than to stop them. The more they suppressed them, the more anxious the soldiers became. Nieliang could see it clearly. No matter how Jiang Pingji approached them quietly, the enemy's purpose of the night attack was nothing more than to force him to fight. Send someone to pay attention. She will come again tonight. Tell the soldiers not to be careless. The enemy was obviously harassing them, and would not give up until they achieved their goal. Wei Yong and the others agreed, but they were a little worried. No matter how the low-level soldiers spread rumors, it indirectly proved one thing: the enemy was indeed elusive. If they did not think of a way to expose the enemy's tricks, the rumors would only become more and more intense, which was extremely disadvantageous to them. It turned out that the celestial soldiers and ghost generals were all fake. The real reason for their elusive appearance was disguise. During the sneak attack last night, there was only a small crescent moon in the sky, and it was even covered by dark clouds. The soldiers wore an ancient version of a ghillie suit for camouflage. Their exposed skin was smeared with charcoal, and they basically blended in with the night. Because of insufficient nutrition, the ancient soldiers had an extremely high rate of night blindness. Even if they did not have night blindness, they more or less had other problems. It was difficult for the soldiers standing on the watchtower to discover the small movements in the distance, let alone to warn them in advance. This was the real reason why Jiang Pingji's soldiers were elusive. In the middle of the night, Jiang Pingji sent people to sneak attack, again. This time, the number of troops was greater than the previous night. She was eager to let the entire enemy camp know. There was a hot-tempered general in Nieliang's tent, and he directly asked for the order to send troops. When he went out and chased for a mile, there was not even a shadow of the enemy. At that moment, there was the sound of firecrackers exploding in another place. The loud noise could be heard from afar. Jiang Pingji squatted in the distance and watched the movement. She asked Bai Ning, "General Bai's ancestors ran a firecracker business?" Bai Ning did not feel ashamed. "It's an old skill passed down from my ancestors. Unfortunately, in troubled times, the people can't even feed themselves. How can they have the mood to play with these things?" Because the ancestral business could not continue, Bai Ning could only find another way out. His daughter also had to get married. He had to climb a little higher in order to find a husband of a higher level for her. Jiang Pingji asked, General Bai, do you have any thoughts? Bai Ning was dumbfounded. What thoughts could he have? Could it be that the Lord was asking about his employment intentions after retirement? After the troubled times end, I can't carry a sword anymore. Maybe I'll pick up my old profession. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking, General Bai, you have the skill. Why didn't you think of continuing to study it? Bai Ning was puzzled. What's the use of studying firecrackers? The people can't afford them. Jiang Pingji was helpless. She guided him and said, Can a piece of firecracker blow up a clay pot? Bai Ning nodded affirmatively. Yes. She asked again. If 100 pieces of firecrackers are gathered together, won't it be more powerful? Maybe it can even blow up the city gate. Bai Ning was speechless. This was something that would make people happy during the new year. Did his lord only think about killing people and fighting wars? Let's set off firecrackers. That's possible. But the battlefield is chaotic. The enemy's rockets ignite the firecrackers first. Won't they blow up our own people? If 100 pieces of firecrackers were gathered together, the volume would be huge. The target would be too obvious. The feasibility was very low. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Then let's change our thinking. If after studying it, the power of a piece of firecracker can match up to 100 pieces, what do you think? Bai Ning was silent for a while. He felt that his lord was indulging in fantasy. How could the power of a piece of firecracker be compared to 100 pieces? Was it possible to compress hundreds of parts of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal into one? More than 200 years ago, firecrackers only burned bamboo. Later, people discovered the magical effects of sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. They simply filled these things in a bamboo tube according to a certain proportion and burned them. They were also called firecrackers. Bai Ning's ancestral skill, to put it bluntly, was a proportional formula. If firecrackers were made according to this formula, the explosion would be loud, and the production process would be less prone to accidents. My lord's idea is interesting. Chapter 1494. Jiang Pingji could also see that Bai Ning did not take this matter to heart at all. However, this reaction was normal. After all, in Bai Ning's mind, firecrackers were toys that children played with during the new year. If such a toy could really play a role on the battlefield, it would be as ridiculous as someone telling Jiang Pingji that a child's toy gun could destroy a planet with one shot. Besides, firecrackers were so capable, why hadn't the ancestors discovered it? She smiled and said, Interesting ideas are the key to innovation. How can you climb higher if you blindly believe in the things of the predecessors? So what if it was whimsical? Since ancient times, how many epic-making inventions had not been derived from whimsical ideas? Bai Ning secretly shook his head when he heard this. Sometimes he wondered what kind of person the lord he followed was. She had the ambition to pacify the world and end the chaos. She should be a broad-minded leader, who cared about the people's livelihood. In this aspect, she did a good job. No, it should be said that she did a good job in every aspect, so much so that people had doubts about her identity. Was she a simple politician, a wise monarch, a brave general, or a whimsical Maha's child? No matter which identity it was, Bai Ning could not feel a trace of disgust or disgust. Instead, he would be led by the nose by her thoughts. If my lord finds it interesting, you might as well send someone to try it out. I have a pen passed down from my ancestors in my family. Maybe it will come in handy. Bai Ning was not optimistic in his heart, but he would not directly refute her on the surface. Instead, he would go along with her wishes. After all, he was a feudal lord who had power over the world. Naturally, he had the right to whimsical ideas. Whatever she wanted to do, there would always be people who would be willing to sacrifice their lives for her, put it into practice for her, and please her. Jiang Pingji shook her head. It's not necessary at the moment. Let's wait until the world is pacified. Even the most primitive explosives were subversive to the changes in the form of war in this era. Jiang Pingji did not want to create another Shizhong, who stole secrets. This kind of weapon should be used only when she had the ability to protect it to prevent it from falling into the hands of other forces. Bai Ning nodded and said no more. Jiang Pingji said, "Maybe I should talk to Wuxia about this. She will most likely be very interested." Bai Ning laughed. "That's true. Wuxia's favorite thing to do is to make the impossible possible. She's too competitive." As a father, how could Bai Ning not know that his daughter, Bai Wuxia, had suffered discrimination and verbal abuse because of the birthmark on her face? When she had just reached adulthood, there were a few Icemen who came to propose marriage. However, the ones who proposed were all local hooligans and scoundrels. One of them was even an old widower who was over 70 years old. Although he was old, his heart was not old. Bai Ning was furious, and Bai Wuxia was so angry that she chased Icemen out. Some Icemen ran away with their tails between their legs, and some Icemen had a hot and sharp temper. They directly said that Bai Wuxia was ugly, and marrying a rascal with such a condition would be too much. After this village, even if she wanted to marry in the future, she wouldn't be able to get married in this lifetime. "Father, if my future husband isn't a hero that I like, I'd rather comb my hair and be a widow for the rest of my life than marry." His daughter had such a fiery temper. As a father, what else could Bai Ning do other than protect her? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "If one day I can conquer the world and establish a country, Wuxia's achievements will definitely be above yours." Bai Ning was elated when he heard that. What did this mean? It meant that the Lord didn't mind Bai Wuxia's crime of not guarding well at all. Not only did she not intend to punish her, but she also wanted to put her in an important position. He was overjoyed in his heart, but he put on a serious expression on his face. "Wuxia is just a girl in the boudoir. How would I dare to think so much?" As soon as he said that, Bai Ning couldn't help but slap himself in his heart. How could he say that? Didn't he see that his lord was also a woman? "I'm also a woman, but I also dare to think about the whole world." Jiang Pingji didn't blame him for being the stupidest. She smiled and said, "The words male and female are just to distinguish between genders. It doesn't represent an individual's ability. Belittling someone because of their gender, you're not qualified as a father." Bai Ning smiled sheepishly and echoed, "You're right, my lord. I will pay attention in the future." While they were talking, the troops who launched sneak attacks and harassed them had already stirred up trouble everywhere in the Nia camp, making them restless for the whole night. Jiang Pengji said, "If this goes on, I don't think the possibility of Nieliang sending his troops is high. That person is very patient." When Bai Ning heard that the topic was back to business, he immediately said seriously, "It doesn't matter if he doesn't send his troops. We'll continue to cause trouble. If he's not afraid of the morale of the troops collapsing, then we'll continue to endure. 1,000-year tortoise, a 10,000-year tortoise. If he can really endure anything, I'll admire him." If they didn't fight and just harass them, sooner or later, they would break down. All the soldiers in the Nia camp were living people made of flesh and blood. They weren't dead people who didn't eat or drink. It was fine if they didn't sleep well for 1 or 2 days, but if they were like this for several days in a row, it would only be a matter of time before they became mentally exhausted and their combat power would decline. Moreover, if they harass them too much, they'll know that our army is bluffing. They'll inevitably let down their guard. Bai Ning had a good grasp of this. Although he didn't have much experience in leading troops, when he was in his hometown in Nansheng, he was still the head of the local militia. He relied on various tactics to protect the land from foreign enemies. No matter how cautious Nieliang is and how patient he is, the soldiers under him are just fools. Nieliang could maintain a high level of vigilance from beginning to end, but the soldiers under him couldn't. There were too many stories about the wolf coming. When the wolf really came, people would not believe it anymore. Bai Ning didn't know the story of the wolf is coming, but he knew how to wear down the enemy's vigilance bit by bit. Jiang Pingji said, "I'm just afraid that we'll repeat the same trick too many times and be seen through." No matter how stupid the enemy was, they couldn't fall into the same trap repeatedly. Bai Ning seriously considered this problem. He decided to attack the Nia camp the night after tomorrow. After harassing the enemy camp for 3 consecutive nights, the enemy would be mentally exhausted. The fourth night attack would definitely be effective. The next day, Jiang Pingji came over to challenge them as usual. Nie Ying and the others were about to go crazy with anger. Fan Chen said angrily, "What's wrong with Lu Shi? She's causing trouble in the middle of the night and causing trouble in the day. Does she have too much energy and nowhere to vent it?" Attacking at night did not let them sleep, and challenging them in the day did not let them have a good rest. Wei Yong said, "It's obvious that she's forcing us to fight." Fan Chen said, "Let's fight then. Are we afraid of her?" Although Nie Qing was still young, he knew his father's considerations and volunteered to hold the fort. Nie Liang frowned and thought for a while, then said, "If that's the case, then let's send them away." He didn't want to fight not only because of his health, but also because Jiang Pingji was too strange. The consecutive coincidences had shaken the morale of the army. Before finding the perfect opportunity, Nie Liang didn't want to take the risk and let Jiang Pingji take advantage of him. Chapter 1495. Hey, they're finally willing to come out. I thought they secretly escaped. He had challenged them for so many days, but they didn't respond. He thought they would stand him up that day. He didn't expect to be surprised. You don't know. A tortoise's head has been in its shell for a long time. Doesn't it need to come out to look for food? The soldiers around him roared with laughter. Their mocking malice was written all over their faces. The general's voice wasn't soft, but the two armies were separated by a long distance. They could only vaguely hear a little movement. Even if they didn't hear it clearly, they knew it wouldn't be pleasant just by looking at how the enemy was laughing. Jiang Pingji yawned while riding on the horse. She said in a bored tone, "Is this another sign of a general duel?" She really didn't understand the etiquette of ancient battles. It was fine if the two armies didn't kill the envoys, but there was a general duel. In her opinion, while the Nie army's formation was unstable, she could directly lead her troops to attack. A general duel would give the enemy time to prepare. Of course, a general duel was not very frequent. It was generally limited to the battlefield. According to the current situation of war, there might not be a general duel in 100 or 200 years. Bai Ning volunteered to go. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and gestured for him to go. "I'll hold the line for you." She wasn't bragging, but she had never lost a one-on-one in this world. There's another reward for killing the enemy's general in front of the battle. Bai Ning cupped his hands and accepted the order. He spurred his horse forward. The general from the Nie army was Bai Ning, who was over 40 years old. His hair and beard were already white. He was contemptuous and angry at the same time. Could it be that Jiang Pingji had no capable generals under her command, and had only sent an old and weak general? It's good that Lu Shi is so contemptuous. I'll go meet him. There were many generals in the Nie army. Many of them were from Zhongzhao's military families. They had practiced martial arts since they were young and were very brave. Except for a few experienced veterans, most of them were between 25 and 40 years old. They were in their prime. Is there no one else in Lu Shi's camp? He actually sent such an old man. He's obviously here to die. Who are you? Tell me your name. My blade does not behead a nameless person. The two of them were dozens of feet apart, but his voice was like thunder, and every word could be heard clearly. The newcomer was tall and sturdy, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. His arms were as thick as an ordinary woman's thighs. His muscles were solid, and he stood out from the crowd. His attire was quite stylish, and one could tell at a glance that he was a high-ranking general in Nie Ying's army. A full set of armor made of fine iron. The armor was painted with ferocious and frightening beasts. Just by standing there, this person gave people a chilling feeling. In his hand was a long saber that was 3 meters long. The edge of the saber was cold and intimidating. The horse he was riding on wasn't small, but when this general rode on it, the warhorse seemed petite. In the face of such humiliation, Bai Ning laughed in anger. Such big words. Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? If you still want your father's life, get off your horse, kneel down and call me father. Hearing Bai Ning refer to himself as his father, General Nie Ying's chest burned with anger. He raised his sword and urged his horse forward. In a single exchange, both of them used their full strength. The strength was so great that the hand between his thumb and forefinger felt numb. The general was shocked. He was surprised by Bai Ning's strength. He was clearly an old man whose health was declining, but his strength was not inferior to that of a young man. That was because, although Bai Ning was old, his physical condition was maintained very well. Before he joined Jiang Pingji's side, he had even killed a man-eating female worm with his bare hands. It was not a good habit to judge people by their appearance. Bai Ning felt that he could still fight for more than 10 years. Oh, my son is not an embroidered pillow. I am very relieved. Bai Ning took advantage of his age and called the other party his son. He urged his horse to fight while he was talking nonsense to disturb the other party's condition. Young man, let me teach you a good lesson. Warriors born into a family of generals had advantages, but also certain disadvantages. The advantage was that they could receive formal and systematic education from a young age. They were far from those generals born into the wilderness who only had brute force. The disadvantages were also obvious. No matter how crude a scolding fight was, it could not be compared to an unorthodox one. Bai Ning's martial arts and military tactics were taught by Gu Chun, the former Huban general of Nansheng. Although it was not considered unorthodox, it was indeed not orthodox. He could not guarantee that he would win in a fight, but he definitely could not lose in a scolding fight. The general wanted to deal with the enemy carefully, but the more Bai Ning talked, the angrier he became. In the end, he could not hold it in anymore. You're courting death. With a loud shout, he attacked Bai Ning's face with his long knife. Bai Ning seemed to have expected it. He blocked the attack with his weapon and bent over to avoid it. The two of them fought for more than 10 rounds. Their foreheads, which were wrapped in armor, were dripping with sweat. The clothes inside the armor were wet with hot sweat. Sun Wen frowned and asked Jiang Pingji, "Can you tell who has the upper hand, my lord?" Jiang Pingji said, "Of course it's General Bai Ning. He is more experienced and knows how to preserve his strength and wait for an opportunity to strike. Nie Ying is a good general, but he is young and arrogant. It's inevitable that he will be arrogant. In another 10 rounds, the outcome will be more or less decided." As she spoke, the situation in front of the army was as she expected. General Nie Ying's experience was not as good as Bai Ning's. He was deceived and revealed a flaw. His shoulder was cut. While he was in pain, he made a feint. While Bai Ning was dodging, he urged his horse to rush back to his army. Of course, Bai Ning did not want to lose the military merit that was already in his mouth. He hurriedly urged his horse to catch up. He caught a glimpse of a cold reflection from the corner of his eye. He thought to himself, "This is bad. Is Nie Jun trying to shoot an arrow from the back in broad daylight?" Bai Ning was vigilant as he caught up with his opponent. He raised his knife and cut him in half. The enemy did not even have the chance to scream before he fell off his horse. In the blink of an eye, the arrow was already in front of him. Bai Ning dodged sideways. The arrow pierced through his arm. He immediately rushed back to his camp. At the same time, Nie Qing's face darkened. He did not know whether to reprimand the general who lost his life due to carelessness or to reprimand the young general who shot an arrow from the back. Life and death were not important in a battle between generals. People would only look down on those dirty tricks that could not be seen in the light. It was fine to shoot an arrow from the back, but not only did he not save his own general, he even let the enemy escape successfully. It was even more humiliating. When Qin Gong saw that Bai Ning had returned, his stern face was filled with anger. "Is General Bai all right? What haven't I seen before?" Bai Ning grinned. "It's just an arrow from the back. I suffered some flesh wounds. It's a pity that my head is gone. Killing an enemy general in front of a battle was a great merit. As a trophy, the other party's head was his." Qin Gong did not know whether to laugh or cry. At that moment, he was still concerned about the enemy general's head. General Bai really did not know what to say. Chapter 1496. Bai Ning coughed softly and didn't dare to talk back. He could only listen to his lord's reprimand. Sun Wen came out to smooth things over and appease his lord, lest she get angry and take the initiative to fight. Jiang Pingji fought alone in the battle of the northern borderline. which still left an indelible psychological shadow in Sun Wen's heart. At that moment, another general came out from Nie Ying's side. The general who had been cut in half had been picked up by the soldiers to collect his body. Qin Gong volunteered to fight. "Why are you here? Tell that old man to come out and die." Qin Gong was very good-looking. His only flaw was a long scar on the right side of his face. The location of the scar was very close to his right eye. The scar was left by an arrow when Han Yu ambushed him at Sanshan Valley. If the location was a little more off, it would have either pierced through his brain or blinded his right eye. Who would have thought that one day, Han Yu would become a comrade in the same camp as them? You guys are so shameless. Not only did you sneak an arrow in the dark, but you even said that you want to fight with the injured General Bai. Qin Gong said coldly. A big knife stood in front of him. He said, "If you want to find General Bai, you have to go through me. I'm afraid you won't be able to." As mentioned earlier, most of the generals in Nie Ying's tent came from families of generals. Unlike Dongqing, which valued literature and restrained martial arts, Zhongzhou was full of martial arts. There were many families of generals, and each of them was a big family. The unlucky guy who had been killed by Bai Ning was a cousin of the general in front of him. Similar to Xieze and Li Yun, the two had a good relationship in private. He couldn't bear to see his cousin being hunted down and cut in half at the waist. The sound of the war drums resounded in the sky. Qin Gong didn't talk nonsense and went forward to fight. Good timing. "I'll take your head." Jiang Pingji continued to watch the battle and yawned. White snorted in dissatisfaction. Both the human and the horse were very unhappy. Sun Wen saw her like this and took the initiative to start a conversation. He couldn't let his lord continue yawning. Such a lazy and inattentive look would be seen as not taking them seriously in the eyes of the generals who risked their lives for her. Qin Gong was fighting with his life on the front line, and his lord was squatting in the back, yawning and squeezing tears. "Lord, do you think General Qin has a chance of winning?" Jiang Pingji said. "Of course we have a chance of winning, but overall, the enemy has a slight advantage." Suddenly, my eyes turned red. Zhongzhou is indeed a place where outstanding people are born. The Nie family is also a wealthy family among the wealthy. Any general you can pick out is capable. When watching a general fight, the first thing to look at was his aura, figure, and muscles. The poor study literature, the rich practice martial arts. Although books were very expensive in this era, the cost of training a qualified general was no less than that of training a great scholar. To be a general, not only did he need to have an excellent body and talent, he also needed to study military books, buy all kinds of equipment, and take care of his body was also a huge expense. Fish and meat could not be missed. How could a martial artist be so strong when he had to eat plain vegetables and porridge all day long? If his muscles and bones were damaged, he would need to use herbs to nurse them back to health. How could an ordinary family provide these conditions? There were some boorish men who were born with divine strength who climbed up by relying on their strength, but their height was limited, and they could not become generals. Among the generals under Jiang Pingji, except for Dian Yan who came from a grassroots background, which one of the others did not have a certain background. Meng Hun first followed the Meng family in Sangzhou, and was a general of the Meng family. He suffered when he was young, but after he climbed up, the resources came. Luo Yu was the coach of the Imperial Guards in Dongqing, and his family also had a background. Li Yin grew up with Xie Qian. No matter how hard Xie Qian lived, how could he let his son lack resources? Fu Wang was a boorish man who grew up in a pack of wolves. He followed his adoptive father, Fu Yang, when he was young, and could be considered half a son of a general. Xieze was born in the Xie family, and Qin Gong's father's family had worked hard for the Su family for generations. Both of them were good seedlings. When Jiang Nongqin first learned martial arts, Jiang Pingji invested a lot. After Jiang Pingji's power stabilized, she promoted many young generals, but they were still inexperienced and could not compare to the children of a general. Counting the generals under her command, there were not many who were trained by herself. Those who could be used were basically ready-made ones from other families. I'm so envious. The rich Nie family did not have to spend much effort to recruit so many good seedlings. It was infuriating to compare. Sun Wen said with a smile. My lord, you alone are equivalent to 100 people. If anyone is envious, it's them who are envious of us. Jiang Pengji asked him in return. Does that mean Zidao allowed me to fight? Sun Wen was speechless. No, he did not say that. Don't accuse me wrongly. While they were talking, General Nia had already tricked Qin Gong. He noticed that Qin Gong was making some unnatural movements because of his right eye. This small movement could not be noticed if one was not careful, but he noticed it and used it to attack the right side of Qin Gong's face. It was a feint. Qin Gong subconsciously thought of the stray arrow in the Valley of the Three Mountains. When he dodged, it was slightly to the side. He did not notice that the enemy had taken out 2 metal balls from his waist. He saw the enemy's fingers flip, and the 2 metal balls flew out. They happened to be out of Qin Gong's sight. Jiang Pengji did not wait for Sun Wen to deny it. She gave an order, and White rushed out excitedly. She unsheathed her long sword and forced the enemy to retreat. She reached out with her left arm and caught Qin Gong, who had almost fallen off his horse. I'll fight. You go down. Jiang Pengji was dressed in men's clothing. Her face was painted with a darker color of makeup. She looked like a slightly thin and weak youth. Qin Gong steadied himself. Just as he was about to say something, his lord rushed toward the enemy. So thin and small. Did Lu Shi run out of military rations? A general should have broad shoulders, strong muscles, and one arm should be the size of a man's thigh. Jiang Pengji was as thin as a woman. Looking at her pitiful appearance, he suspected that she had been dragged over to take the blame without eating breakfast. Get someone else to do it. It's either old or young. Why is Lu Shi's camp filled with a motley crew? Jiang Pengji's face darkened. Behind her, the 5 million salted fish who were cheering for her felt sympathy for the unknown general. I know the Nia family is rich, but you said that I'm poor. I'm not willing. Was she poor? Since she robbed Tao's family clean, she didn't know that she was poor. The enemy sneered, but he could not laugh anymore. Jiang Pengji looked like a thin scholar, but she was shockingly strong. The horse under the enemy's crotch let out a neigh, unable to bear the burden. Not only that, but White also bullied the horse. Relying on its huge size, it knocked the enemy's horse until it could not stand steadily. Seeing the situation, the enemy knew that he could not gain the upper hand. So he tried to trick Jiang Pengji. Unexpectedly, Jiang Pengji did not chase after him. When she saw the enemy turn to escape, she took the horse noose and wrapped it around his neck. She forcefully pulled him off the horse. Do you think I'm stupid? White, trample him to death. Chapter 1497. Wu Hanyu. Familiar formula, familiar taste, familiar violence from the familiar streamer. Shui Di. White is a streamer among horses. He's just as violent. He crushed a person's skull with his hoof. By Mo Chu Chu. I only have one question. Why did the streamer just praise the Nia family for being wealthy and the people of Zhongzhou? Why did she suddenly kill someone in the next second? Shouldn't the normal scenario be to defeat them and leave an indelible psychological trauma in their hearts? Then one day, she can get rid of the Nia family and smoothly pick up other families? If the streamer kills someone now, won't there be one less overtime team in the future? Fu Rong Gugu. You guys don't understand. The Nia family is a legitimate wealthy family. The streamer doesn't feel bad about the death of a few generals. Anyway, there are a series of little white rabbits waiting for her to conquer. If she doesn't kill all those she doesn't like, how will she recruit those she likes in the future? After so many years, the salted fish are used to all kinds of violent and bloody scenes. They can even survive the most disgusting burning of 1,000 corpses. What's the big deal about a pair of hooves crushing someone's skull? What kind of broken limbs and remains haven't been seen in a chaotic battle between two armies? Jiang Pengji flicked her wrist and flung the miserable corpse of the enemy general more than 10 feet away. She calmly rode on the back of the horse. You've gone too far. 2 of the Nia army's generals were killed. While their morale plummeted, some people were so angry that they disregarded the obstruction and ran out on horseback. Jiang Pengji laughed. Are you here to die too? Don't. It wasn't easy for your parents to raise a good-for-nothing like you. Look at you. You have a family and a wife and concubines. If you die in my hands, I'll indirectly kill many people. She didn't curse like Bai Ning, but she was very sarcastic. The enemy general was already very angry. At that moment, his veins were bulging. Die. She only heard the other party shout loudly, carrying a pair of heavy-looking double broad-axes and rushing towards her. The enemy general looked like a power-type player who specialized in strength. Jiang Pingji knew the enemy's strength was almost double that of the good-for-nothing she had just fought. If this kind of brute force was used by an ordinary person, it would be enough to be regarded as an innate god. Jiang Pingji easily withstood the attack, but White was not used to it. It angrily rammed into the enemy horse that had provoked it. Although White had taken a few maternity leave in the past few years, and had become the mother of a few cubs, its temper had not improved at all. Instead, it had become even more violent and vicious. Apart from its owner, Jiang Pingji, even its stableman and husband, Little White, who had been taking care of it all year round, would be scolded in the face if it got too close. Yo, your strength is not bad. What a pity. Are your axes made of mud? After Jiang Pingji got her hands on the god-slaying saber, she was no longer interested in other weapons. In her era, the god-slaying saber was a weapon of war at the top of the pyramid. In the current era, it was a true divine weapon. The strength of the clash just now was extremely great. Dao's blade had directly caught the other party's axe blades, leaving 2 clear cuts on the other party's axe blades. When the enemy general heard this, he was extremely angry. When he saw the mark on the axe, only fear remained in his heart. You still have the time to be in a daze on the battlefield? If you don't go to the Yellow Springs Road, who will? The corners of Jiang Pingji's mouth curled up. She had a relaxed attitude. She did not care about the battle at all because it was impossible for her to lose. If she lost, she would immediately bring the keyboard over and kneel in front of the old chief to prevent herself from making a fool of herself. At the same time, Nie Qing brought Nie Yang to the front to lecture him. However, due to the battlefield, Nie Qing could not be too harsh with his words. Nie Yang also knew that his arrow was too rash, so he did not dare to defend himself. He knew Nie Qing too well. He was soft-hearted and kind. If he remained silent and let Nie Qing say a few words, he would calm down in no time. Nie Yang was about to daydream when he heard the system's voice. He never knew that the system could be nervous and fearful. It was as if it had met a terrifying natural enemy. It's Lu Shi. Nie Yang's lazy eyes showed some surprise. He asked the system in his heart, Lu Shi? What Lu Shi? The system's next words almost broke Nie Yang's expression. The person fighting on the battlefield is Lu Shi, and the knife in his hand. It can't be wrong. This knife. Nie Yang, no matter what, you have to take that knife. Lu Shi cannot be left alive. Nie Yang secretly glanced at Jiang Pingji, who was playing with him. He could not suppress the shock in his heart. Isn't she a feudal lord? Nie Yang had heard of Jiang Pingji's bravery in battle in Zhongzhou, but he had never taken the rumors to heart. The son of a rich family did not sit under the eaves. The son of a rich family did not ride a horse. The sacred lord did not take advantage of danger to be lucky. If even these initiating children knew, how could a feudal lord not know? If he were to fight on the battlefield, he would either die or be injured. If something happened to him, wouldn't his enemies laugh their heads off? Therefore, Nie Yang always thought that the rumors were spread by Jiang Pingji herself to exaggerate her bravery and achievements. This kind of marketing method could be found everywhere in history. In order to show off their talents, some people would boast about their achievements. They had to cheat and brag about their political and military achievements in order to be seen by others. How could an ordinary and mediocre ruler become an eternal emperor? It was enough to have a strong marketing team and a face as thick as the corner of a city wall. One word was boasting. Obviously, Jiang Pingji was not such a fake person. She even told the truth about the number of troops she had deployed to the front lines, let alone other places. Fake. She was disdainful because the speed at which others boasted was slower than her own speed. The system responded to Nie Yang's question. Who knows what kind of person she is? The sword in her hand gives me an ominous feeling. The system had split from the main body a long time ago, so it did not know a lot of information. However, it was well aware of what the god-slaying sword was used for. At that moment, such a sword appeared in the hands of a mortal whom it could not see through. It felt somewhat uneasy. Nieyang raised his eyebrows. So, this monster was afraid of that sword? He could not help but plot in his heart, but now was not a good time to do so. Brother, there is something. I must say. Nieyang pretended to be pitiful, and Nieching's heart softened. Nieching asked him, "What is it?" Nieyang leaned close to his ear and whispered, "The person fighting on the front lines is Lu Shi." What? Nieching was so shocked that he almost lost his composure. The commotion attracted the attention of the supervising guards. He could not care about that and hurriedly asked, "Is it true?" Nieyang said, "There is a portrait of a painter in my residence. When I saw the young general just now, I thought he looked familiar. After careful observation, I realized that it was very likely to be Lu Shi. Everyone knows that Lu Shi has a long sword in his hand. The shape is exactly the same as in the portrait." Hearing the commotion, the guards were astonished. They rode their horses to the front of the formation to take a closer look. Chapter 1498. Wei Yong had seen Jiang Pingji before, but that was a few years ago. They had only met briefly a few times. When supervising the battle, Wei Yong's position was some distance away from the front line. He did not realize Jiang Pingji's identity, but Nieyang did. Since he recognized her, there was no reason to miss the opportunity. Wei Yong gave the general beside him a look. The general understood and immediately rushed out of the battle formation. Jiang Pingji had played enough. She was about to cut off the enemy's head when a gust of wind came from her side. "General Lin, I will help you." The salted fishes were in an uproar. How shameless. 2 against 1. Cutie Xiao Meng Xian. Motherf asterisk Ker, 2 against 1. 2 strong men against a weak woman. How shameless are they? The Nia army is so capable. Why don't they send another one to make up a lineup of 3 heroes fighting Lu Bu? Streamer, retreat if you can't handle it. Don't fight them. The salted fishes were in an uproar. They saw the bullet screen and laughed. Cutie Xiao Meng Xian was indeed not aware of how good their streamer was at fighting. The 2 generals attacked from the left and right. They cooperated very well and slowly lured Jiang Pingji to a position close to the Nia army. Jiang Pingji had eaten more salt than they had walked. How could she not realize it? Did they really think she was a boor who had lost her mind, because she was addicted to fighting? Not to mention how strong her perception of danger was, she had a spiritual realm. Threats within the realm were useless against her. Old Master Sun Wen was worried from beginning to end. He felt that something was wrong when he saw the enemy general trying to lure Jiang Pingji to the other side. Qin Gong said, "Counselor, shall I support the Lord?" Looking at their formation, "I'm afraid there is an ambush in the dark." Sun Wen said solemnly, "I'm afraid the Lord's identity has been exposed." Qin Gong heard this. If the Lord was killed by the enemy's arrows in front of the battle formation, they could commit suicide to apologize. "I'll go now." Qin Gong pulled the reins tightly, and was about to urge the horse out of the battle formation when the situation changed again. Jiang Pingji's strength was not inferior to the 2 of them, which shocked the 2 generals. What made them even more frightened was that Jiang Pingji actually chuckled in a voice that only the 3 of them could hear. "Do you really think that I don't know how many bastards are hiding in the dark and shooting arrows? You know?" Knowing this, he still followed the 2 of them into the trap. How arrogant was this person? Jiang Pingji yelled. "Mere mortals want to fight against destiny. You overestimate yourself." When the idle people heard what Jiang Pingji said, the bullet screen was in an uproar. "Guikai Guo Fengxiao. Everyone get out of the way. The streamer is ready to show off." The bullet screen was like a command. Hundreds of arrows flew out from the Nia army's formation. Their target was only Jiang Pingji. When Sun Wen, Qin Gong, Bai Ning, and the others saw this scene, they felt like their guts were about to explode. Only Jiang Pingji stood on her horse and sneered. "Master!" No matter how fast Qin Gong was, he couldn't make it in time. In a moment of desperation, he shouted out her identity. In the blink of an eye, the rain of arrows had fallen. Jiang Pingji calmly beheaded 2 of the enemy's generals. A visible ripple spread out with her as the center. In the next second, a miraculous scene appeared, causing Qin Gong to swallow the words he was about to say. The ripples in the water had a touch of gold, and the momentum of the hundreds of arrows was greatly reduced. They stopped 5 feet away from Jiang Pingji. Did time stop? Jiang Pingji sneered and glanced in a certain direction of the enemy. Nie Yang felt cold from her stare. He didn't know why, but he had a hunch that Jiang Pingji was looking at him. System, is she human? The arrogant system was terrified. It was as quiet as a chicken. Nie Yang suspected that Jiang Pingji was looking at him, but the system knew very well that the person she was looking at was not Nie Yang, but itself. White carried Jiang Pingji back gracefully and calmly. The enemy was so frightened by the scene that they didn't dare to shoot a second wave of arrows. When Jiang Pingji was far away, the arrows that were frozen in the air rustled and fell to the ground like fallen leaves. Kill. She unsheathed her sword. Only then did everyone wake up from the scene. Old man Sun Wen couldn't help but touch his chest. He almost forgot to breathe. Hearing Jiang Pingji's order, Bai Ning and the other generals immediately led their troops to kill the enemy. The battlefield was filled with battle cries. Zidao, you don't look too good. Jiang Pingji, the main culprit, didn't have any self-awareness. She even had the cheek to ask Sun Wen in return. Sun Wen's fingers trembled as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He hadn't completely come back to his senses. It's okay. I'll be fine after a while. I'll be fine after a while. The moment the enemy released the arrows, Sun Wen almost thought that Jiang Pingji would die in front of the formation. He couldn't think of any other reason for the miraculous scene just now, other than the heavens' decree. Sun Wen was so sure, not to mention the enemy's camp. Jiang Pingji calmly returned to her camp under the rain of arrows. The enemy soldiers who witnessed everything lost their will to fight. On the other hand, the soldiers at the rear couldn't see it clearly. Their morale was low, but it wasn't to the point where they had lost their will to fight. Qin Gong and the others led their troops to attack. They didn't encounter any decent resistance. The enemy's line of defense was as fragile as paper. After 2 hours of fierce fighting, the Nie army fled back to the camp with their defeated soldiers. Jiang Pingji's side also sounded the gong to retreat. They returned victorious. My lord, just now. Sun Wen's mind kept replaying the scene where the arrows stopped. The more he thought about it, the more scared he became. Jiang Pingji turned her head in confusion. What just now? Qin Gong, on the other hand, was straightforward. He went straight to the point. The enemy released hundreds of arrows, but my lord was unharmed. Is there really a god protecting you? After Jiang Pingji transmigrated, she rarely used her spiritual power in actual combat. The few times she used it was to investigate the enemy's situation. This time, she made an exception to confirm the rumor that she was the child of destiny. She wanted to completely destroy the Nie army's psychological defense. She admitted that she was very stingy. She still remembered the fire at Zhangjiang Pass. If she didn't pay them back, they would really think that she was made of mud. God. There's no such thing. This is just my own ability. Jiang Pingji's thoughts raced. She suddenly thought of something. A comprehensive explanation appeared in her mind. She said, when I was young, I had a dream. I dreamed that the scorching sun descended from the west. The land was barren and starving people were everywhere. Just as I was feeling afraid, an old man in white with white hair and a beard walked out from the sunset. He gave me a set of bamboo slips. He told me that the bamboo slips recorded a set of body training techniques that were specially created for women. He also said that women are born weak because they lack 30% yang energy when they are created. They can make up for this deficiency by practicing this technique later in life. When practiced to perfection, they can even release their inner energy to protect themselves. Sun Wen was silent for a long time. He seemed to be thinking about the truth of his lord's words. Jiang Pingji extended her hand to him and smiled. Try it. Sun Wen raised his hand and put it down. Halfway through, he felt that he had hit a barrier and could not move an inch. He didn't believe it. He increased his strength, but it still did not move. Instead, he saw a layer of pale golden ripples. Jiang Pingji said, do you believe me now? The underlying meaning was. Chapter 1499. Sunwen retracted his hand and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. The Golden Crow's descent from the east is already against common sense. My lord also dreamed of 1,000 miles of desolation and starving people everywhere. Perhaps it was a sign that chaos was coming. In a desperate situation, a deity came out and gave her a book, which happened to cater to the slim chance of survival. Jiang Pingji listened to Sunwen cover up her lie with a straight face. She was very satisfied. It was worth it for her to pretend to be pretentious today. However, Bai Ning reacted quickly. He said, I heard that the training technique practiced by the female troops was also passed down by my lord. Could it be? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, Indeed, I improved it according to the book given by the deity, because I found that only I can practice the original version. If ordinary women practice it, not only will there be no benefits, but there will also be the danger of exploding and dying. I made some slight changes, and the effect seems to be not bad. Bai Ning and the others were convinced. It was not only because the person who said this was Jiang Pingji, but also because the soldiers of the female battalion were solid evidence. The size of the female battalion was not considered large, but their physical fitness was indeed similar to that of the young and strong men. Some outstanding ones could even surpass them. In addition, their training technique also had a set of coherent combat techniques. If ordinary men did not practice martial arts, 2 or 3 of them might not be able to take down a female soldier. Bai Ning was surprised. It turned out that they were making up for the 30% of yang energy that they were born with. The salted fish listened to Jiang Pingji deceiving them with a straight face, and secretly gave her a thumbs up. What was the highest realm of lying? Naturally, it was to squeeze countless lies together, and turn them into the truth that others could not refute. Tu de Feiqiu. Looking at the streamer lying with a straight face, I really believe her. Bai Huayu. The streamer is not completely lying. At least that set of training technique is really useful. There was a trending topic a few days ago. It said that a martial arts club that was about to close down was selling dog meat. They claimed to teach martial arts, but in the end, they taught the streamer's training technique. The male students also improved, but they did not improve as rapidly as the female students. There was a female student who brutally beat up 4 or 5 groups of perverts on the street. At the mention of this trending topic, all the salted fishes recalled it. The incident started when the female student was on a public bus and encountered 4 or 5 perverts who had nothing better to do than to grope her buttocks and try to take off her underwear under her short skirt. In a fit of rage, she violently beat them up, and the people on the bus could not stop her. The perverts even knelt down and begged for their lives. If someone had not called the police in time, and the police officers had not saved their lives, they would have been sent to the ICU by the hot-tempered female student. In the end, they found out that the female student was underage and had been practicing martial arts for 5 years. She usually only sparred with the students of the dojo, so she didn't hold back. As soon as the report came out, the dojo became an internet sensation. There was an endless stream of parents signing up, and the news of the dojo master being sold could no longer be covered up. The dojo master was completely exposed by the netizens. Thinking about the trending topic and listening to Jiang Pingji's words, the female salted fish were eager to have a go, while the male salted fish were trembling. Shamate Li Si. Baby QEQ, I don't want to marry a weaker version of the streamer at all. Is there a way to survive domestic violence? Deng Hai Kuang Ma. Is it too late for me to apologize to my wife with a washboard? To tell you the truth, my wife has been a fan of the streamer ever since she started streaming. She's secretly learning the technique of physical training. I feel so flustered. No wonder she used to act coquettishly to me when I just poured out a bottle of mineral water. Yesterday, when the elevator broke down, she actually carried a gas tank and climbed 5 floors in one go. Tu de Feiqiu. You're done for. You can't afford to provoke her. Stop struggling. Don't provoke your wife in the future. Domestic violence will take your life. Lualua Wading. It's time to set up a women and men protection organization to protect the poor male comrades who are subjected to domestic violence. The salted fish chatted happily, but it was Jiang Pingji who remembered their jokes. She had lied earlier that women lacked 30% of yang energy when they were conceived and needed to practice to make up for it. It was just to lay a foundation for the future. To improve the status of women, it was far from enough to just have women in power. After all, there were too few women who could climb to a position of power, and they themselves had physiological burdens. In the current agricultural society, it was impossible to close the gap between women and men in terms of production, so improving the status of women was just empty talk. If technology was developed enough to change the mode of social production and free manpower from the fields, people would naturally have the energy to care about human rights. If they could not even provide food and clothing, how could they talk about equal human rights and equality between men and women? Or they could strengthen the competitiveness of labor and production. Jiang Pingji planned to focus on the latter, while developing technology to promote the former. To her, human resources did not distinguish between men and women. Wasting human resources was a shameful act. She lied and covered the technique of physical training with a layer of mythical color. It would be much easier to promote it to the people in the future. For women, practicing it was not only to make up for the physiological gap between them and men, but also to help with childbirth and reduce the probability of dystocia. The medical technology of this era was too backward. Women married early, and their first childbirth was generally concentrated at 16 or 17 years old. Their bodies were not fully developed, so the probability of dystocia and miscarriage was extremely high. Once a pregnant woman gave birth, she would have one foot in the gates of hell. If the technique of physical training could reduce the difficulty and pain of childbirth and reduce the risk of death, wouldn't it be a good thing? Jiang Pingji returned victorious. The way the soldiers looked at her was not like they were looking at a person, but more like they were worshipping a god. The heavy rain when Nieliang set fire to Zhangjiang Pass, and the arrows that stopped in midair today all indicated that Jiang Pingji was the destined son of heaven. Don't be fooled by the fact that they always said, men do not speak of supernatural forces and gods. If a supernatural event really happened, they would believe it faster than anyone else. After her triumphant return, Tiguan Rang handed Jiang Pingji a secret letter. Where did it come from? Looking at the signature, Jiang Pingji asked again, how's the battle over at Jingtu's side? Is it still in a stalemate? Because of the inconvenience of communication, the letter in Jiang Pingji's hands was actually old news from more than a month ago. The mountain spirit descended and bestowed the divine art of shipbuilding. Tiguan Rang's eyes were smiling as he said, it seems that my lord is really the person destined by the heavens. What else could it be if he wasn't the chosen son of heaven? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, spread this out. It's best if everyone knows about it and angers Nieliang to death. Today's miracle and the defeat of the Nia army were enough to make Nieliang suffer. Jiang Pingji was about to leave when she saw that Tiguan Rang was hesitant to speak. She asked, Wenjing, is there anything else? There is indeed one thing, Tiguan Rang said. Since my lord is the son of heaven, you naturally know about the gods. Jiang Pingji saw that Tiguan Rang lied with a straight face and secretly laughed. Others did not know if it was true or false and were fooled by her, but she had told Tiguan Rang about his background. There was no reason for him to be so superstitious. She thought so in her heart, but said, it's true. A trace of malice flashed in Tiguan Rang's eyes. Every word seemed to be coated with poison. If that's the case, why don't my lord reveal some of the will of heaven and announce to the world that Nieliang's lifespan is approaching? Jiang Pingji was speechless. Wenjing, you're really showing off more and more. Chapter 1500. Tiguan Rang saw that Jiang Pingji did not speak. He thought that she felt that it was inappropriate, and was about to persuade her. Jiang Pingji held back her laughter and said, no, Wenjing, you misunderstood. In fact, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. This is what we should do. When dealing with enemies, one could never be too ruthless. Seeing the two of them putting their arms around each other's shoulders and smiling at each other, the same thought appeared in the minds of the surrounding salted fishes. Tudufetio. Colluding with each other. That's perfect. Buckle Jiao Jiao Chi fan. Let's go, let's go. When this pathetic duo is put together, their evil hearts are so scary. Obsessive-compulsive disorder patient. Every time I see Wenjung and the host doing bad things together, I wonder why the host didn't like Wenjung before? Although C.I. Marin was very good, she always felt that C.I. Marin was much gentler and kinder than Wenjung. It was not compatible with the host's aura. Stockholm. I think you seem to have some misunderstanding about beauty, C.I. She looks gentle and kind. Isn't her heart whiter than Master Wenjang's? You haven't seen it with your own eyes when beauty C.I. becomes evil. Anyway, I have gracefully offered my knees to you for a year. Besides, when Big Boss Wenjung met the host, he was already engaged. They were purely friends, so it was impossible for them to call each other Black Cat's Night. It's fine as long as the CP fans keep themselves cute. The host and Big Boss Wenjung seem to have a lot of CP fans. Just entertain yourselves. Don't involve real people. After all, the relationship between the host and Big Boss Wenjung was pure friendship. It was disgusting to forcefully interpret it as love. Even though he was a salted fish, he didn't have a lot of pure KY love brains. He knew his limits. Of course, most of the hardcore fans who liked KY were young. How could their hand speed and internet speed compare to old salted fish who had been single for a long time? How could they imagine the price of a house in a live broadcast room? Always wicked people want to harm Jin. Speaking of which, if it weren't for Simiai's sacrifice, the streamer would really be single for the rest of her life. The salted fish didn't believe in pure friendship between men and women until they met Jiang Pingji. As a very outstanding woman, there were many men around her, but only the lame Wei Ci took a fancy to her. The others were either single or married with children. Salted fish, who had nothing better to do, had even carefully researched this topic, making it a hot topic. In the end, an excellent answer was liked and pushed to the top. Egami sauce. First, no one will fall in love with a boss who squeezes them dry all day long. Secondly, this only proved that they were all straight men. Being in a relationship with a streamer is like coming out of the closet. You guys are touching Tan 90's breasts and talking. Does she look like a girl? The salted fishes chattered incessantly. Jiang Pingji laughed at herself. Wenjung, don't you think we're in cahoots? Tiguanrang glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. His gaze was clear as day. Who would insult themselves like that? This is called like-minded, Tiguanrang retorted with a straight face. Jiang Pingji was speechless. The little princess was right. If they were like-minded, then so be it. She had no objections. Jiang Pingji decided to reward the three armies after the great victory in the day. They celebrated for the whole night, and the bonfire burned throughout the night. In contrast, the atmosphere in Niang was not as relaxed. The entire army was enveloped in a suffocating and oppressive atmosphere. Bad news came one after another, and the morale of the army was completely shaken. 3 valiant generals had died in the battle. Hundreds of arrows stopped in mid-air. Lu Shi was unscathed. The morale of the army had collapsed. The number of casualties and captives reached 40,000. Nie Liang was also shocked to the point of vomiting blood. Perhaps he had gotten used to it, but he did not faint this time. However, his appearance made everyone worried. To put it in a depressing way, their lord Nie Liang looked like he was about to die. Get up. This isn't your fault. Blame the enemy for being difficult to deal with. Nie Liang did not blame his son Nie Qing. Even if he was the one fighting, the situation would probably be the same. According to the scene described by the crowd, their enemy had the support of a deity. Hundreds of arrows could turn a person into a hedgehog. However, all the arrows strangely stopped in midair 5 feet in front of Jiang Pingji. Circles and circles of pale golden ripples were like a heavy shield, blocking all the harm outside. The arrows could not advance an inch. The 3 armies could only watch as she rode away calmly. A strategist sighed. Has anyone seen such a scene since ancient times? Throughout history, when had such a scene appeared? No, perhaps there had been. Nie Liang could not help but think of Beichen from hundreds of years ago. Beichen was the dynasty before the chaos of the 16 kingdoms. This dynasty had unified the Central Plains for 367 years. For many scholars, Beichen was the Orthodox dynasty. This could be seen from Chengjing. Huangsong's ancestor was a descendant of the royal concubine of the Xia dynasty. The royal family of the Xia dynasty was also a descendant of the royal family of Beichen. With this identity, Huangsong could be assisted by Chengjing. Although Huangsong did not know that he had such a powerful background, Chengjing knew. Speaking of Beichen, it was also a dynasty full of legends. The founder of Beichen was born in a small family of farmers. When he was born, a golden dragon was born. Coincidentally, the world was in chaos. His father and brothers died of exhaustion in the Battle of Chunka. Coincidentally, the founder of Beichen led his troops to revolt. At that time, there was a powerful feudal lord who was about to conquer the world. The world thought that this overconfident peasant boy would kneel. Who knew that a few days before the decisive battle, there would be a sudden rainstorm. The dam collapsed and countless lives were drowned on both sides. The enemy's feudal lord suffered because they had set up camp on low ground. Their rations and supplies were all wet and moldy. This was not the worst. On the eve of the decisive battle, there were tens of millions of meteors, long or short, big or small. They accurately hit the camp, causing countless deaths and injuries. It was a godlike operation. Because of this, the royal family of Beichen became known as the descendants of the gods. It lasted for 367 years. There were several coincidental miracles that extended the life of the royal family of Beichen every time. In the last years of Beichen, the royal family courted disaster again. They caused chaos in the world, and the people were plunged into misery and suffering. They could not bear it anymore. There was no need to bear it anymore. Various forces revolted, and the royal family of Beichen was destroyed. However, the feudal lords who destroyed the royal family of Beichen died miserably. Their entire families, young and old, men and women, did not have a good ending. The common people said that the royal family of Beichen was indeed the descendants of the gods. The world should be theirs. Which of the feudal lords who stole their world had a good ending? In the end, the 16 countries were in chaos for so many years. In the end, did the descendants of the royal family of Beichen stand out? Now, the mythical color of Jiangpingji seemed to have the shadow of Beichen. This made people's hearts beat fast. Could it be that the ancestors of the Lu family of Hejian have the blood of the descendants of Beichen? Someone thought of this history like Niel Yang, and spoke to break the heavy atmosphere. Wei Yang's expression became stern. He scolded, "Nonsense! Are you trying to shake the morale of the army?" For Niel Yang and the others, it was undoubtedly one disaster after another. However, this was not the end. Niel Yang tightened his grip on the mat, trying to suppress the rising pain in his chest. The veins on his forehead bulged. After a while, everyone noticed that his eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs were about to pop out of their frames. It was extremely frightening. What else? That's not the only thing, right? What else is there? Just say it. Don't tell me that I'll be angered to death by her. Niel Yang knew his best friend very well. If it was just such a piece of bad news, why would his eyes turn red? Lord! Wei Ling's lips moved for a while, as if hesitating whether to say it or not. In the end, he still said it. He almost choked with sobs as he said. The secret report said, God entered your dreams and told Lu Shi that Lord's lifespan is not enough to be calculated, and is not a concern. A person's lifespan was 12 years in an era, and 100 days in an era. Niel Yang's eyes widened like a goldfish that was suffocating. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and he vomited a mouthful of red and black blood. Everyone was so frightened that they did not dare to make a sound. Wei Ling and Nie Qing hurriedly went forward to support him, but they did not expect the two to be waved away by Niel Yang. Niel Yang's strength was so great that he did not seem to be seriously ill. However, many people were worried that this was the final radiance of the setting sun. Waving the two away, Niel Yang suddenly raised his head and laughed. He raised his hand to the top of the tent and scolded in a hoarse voice. What damned heavens! If fate has decided, It will take away my lifespan now. Man can conquer nature. So what if it's Lu Shi? So what if it's her? Nie Liang stood up shakily. There was a faint hint of insanity between his brows, which made people's hair stand on end. Wei Ling looked at his good friend, and his heart ached uncontrollably. He still remembered the scene when he first met his good friend. He was incomparably elegant and elegant. He wore a black scholar's robe with a thin coat over it. He wore a lacquered gauze crown on his head. His slightly thin lips carried an amiable smile. But there was a faint sense of alienation. He was the standard son of an aristocratic family. Now, how did he become this haggard and demeanor of insanity? As he pondered, he heard Nie Qing's loud shout. It sounded like a cuckoo crying blood. His heart tightened when he heard it. Lifting his head, Wei Ling saw Nie Qing rush forward like an arrow and raise his hand to catch Nie Liang, who had fallen backward with a deathly still face. Wei Ling opened his eyes without blinking. The noises around him gradually faded away. The voices of Lord seemed to be a vague voice from another world. Nie Qing cried out for his father, and a group of colleagues knelt on the ground and cried blood. What happened? How could it be? Wei Ling's knees gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. The night passed. The scouts that Jiang Pingji sent out discovered that the Nie camp was draped in white mourning. Everyone looked mournful and hurriedly sent the news back. Jiang Pingji was having breakfast. Her breakfast that day was a total of 15 meat buns mixed with minced meat. Each bun was the size of a strong man's fist. An ordinary man would be almost full after eating 3 buns. Jiang Pingji ate 15 in a row and drank 3 bowls of seaweed soup with shrimp skin. Jiang Pingji burped inelegantly and patted her flat stomach. She picked up a handkerchief and wiped her mouth. Tell me what's the latest news? Jiang Pingji hated military intelligence before and after eating. It was fine if there was good news, but bad news would ruin her appetite. The soldier said, last night at midnight, Nie Liang died of illness. Everyone in the Nie camp was mourning. The whole army draped in white mourning and hung up white banners overnight. Jiang Pingji was stunned when she heard the news. No. Is Nie Guangshan that weak? Brother, you're really fast. You're rushing to finish the filming. The livestream room was in an uproar. Jiang Pingji hurriedly pushed the food table aside and hurriedly gathered everyone for a discussion. Everyone looked at each other. Even though they had been looking forward to Nie Liang receiving his bento all day and night, when he really did, it felt like a dream. This brother died just like that? Feng Yi and Sun Lan, who were sitting in the corner and listening, muttered to themselves. It was fine if he died, but he died of anger. This was great. Their lord's image of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance had been completely recorded in history. Thinking of the lord's words and actions that were recorded a while ago, Feng Yi felt that her lord would be slandered by the future generations. Wei Xi asked, did the Nie camp really hang up white banners and the whole army draped in white mourning? Jiang Pingji said, Zixiao, are you suspecting that it's a trap? Wei Xi was not sure. Nie Liang was very treacherous, but his body could not withstand a series of blows. Thus Wei Xi said, it's not that I'm suspecting it. It's just that Nie Liang died of illness. We have to send people to offer our condolences. Jiang Pingji. Zixiao, are you serious? Chapter 1502. Although I don't want to admit it, Nie Liang's death seems to have something to do with me. If we send someone to offer our condolences now, I'm afraid that they won't appreciate it. They'll probably think that we're going there to show off our strength. Jiang Pingji felt that whoever she sent would be courting death. Envoys are not to be executed during a battle. *T. This kind of conventional rule could be broken at any time. Which fool would stick to it? Not only did Jiang Pingji and the civil and military officials feel excited, but the salted fish were so shocked that they forgot to eat breakfast. A small group of cute and good-looking people cried until they were out of breath. Topics such as Nie Liang's death and Nie Liang was angered to death by the streamer were also trending. Hearing Jiang Pingji's opening words, many of the salted fish sneered. Long-lasting tea. What do you mean by a little bit of relationship? From the looks of it, the host had no idea what was going on. Tudufeitio. You can't say that. If I remember correctly, Nieliang is not in good health. Didn't Beauty Ci reveal that Nieliang had been poisoned in the past? It seemed that it was done by someone from within the Nie family. Nieliang refused to rest quietly, and the remaining poison greatly reduced his lifespan. Later, it was said that Nieliang's lifespan was less than half a year. Now that he was dead, the host could only be regarded as a catalyst and not the main cause. The person who really killed Nieliang was the original murderer, who poisoned him. Jiang Pingji was at most an accomplice. Always wicked people want to harm Zhen. Sai, he's a Duke of Zhongzhou after all. It's really sad that he's kneeling just like that. Unreal City. Come on, there are plenty of people who have died in the hands of the streamer. So what if they are feudal lords? Some salted fish lamented that Nieliang's death was a pity. Some salted fish celebrated that Jiang Pingji was one step closer to unifying the world. And some salted fish expressed concern and condolences. No matter what the cause of Nieliang's death was, outsiders would think that he died because he was angered by Jiang Pingji. Sending people to offer their condolences was equivalent to sending people to their graves. Jiang Pingji knew this too. How could she send someone to offer her condolences? She never expected that Wei Ci would disagree with her at this time. Out of respect for her opponent, she still had to send someone to offer her condolences. Jiang Pingji said, I've killed at least 8,000 people, if not 10,000. Do I have to pay my respects to all of them? In any case, she wouldn't agree. Regardless of their strength, in terms of status, Nieliang and Jiang Pingji were of the same level. If she really wanted to send someone to offer her condolences, the status of the messenger could not be low. She was not willing to choose anyone. Wei Ci volunteered himself. Jiang Pingji was so angry that she glared at him several times. No matter what Wei Ci said, she refused to agree. Lord, condolences are one thing, but confirming that Nieliang really died of illness is another. What if he really faked his death? Jiang Pingji said. Then let's wait for 3 to 5 months. Anyway, his body has long been ruined. Sooner or later, he will meet the king of hell. Wei Ci could only sigh. Jiang Pingji was stubborn, and so was he. No one was willing to take a step back when it came to issues that concerned the overall situation. In the end, Jiang Pingji was so angry that she flicked her sleeves and left. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Tiguan Rang said quietly, You're really bold. The Lord obviously wants to protect you from taking risks, but you don't appreciate it. Wei Ci smiled bitterly and said, How can I not know the Lord's intentions? It's just that Nieliang died of illness. Whether it's true or not, if the Lord doesn't express her stance, I'm afraid you'll be criticized. This is not good for the Lord's reputation. The time when Nieliang died of illness was when the morale of the Nie army was in chaos. No matter what, they didn't dare to kill the messenger when there was no leader. We can't sacrifice the lives of more than 200,000 troops just because of a moment of impulsiveness. His lord had a violent temper. If something really happened to the messenger, she would definitely send troops. Tiguan Rang glanced at him and sneered. I see. You've thought it through. No wonder you're so fearless. It was precisely because he saw through the trick that he had the confidence to volunteer for the mission. Wei Ci continued. There's another point. Xi's elder brother, Wei Dan, is Nieliang's confidant. Tiguan Rang said coldly. If I were your elder brother, I would definitely make sure that you wouldn't be able to return. Otherwise, you'll become a scourge by releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Wei Ci smiled and said, My elder brother's temperament is different from Wenjing's. He's good at everything. His only weakness is that he values friendship too much. If it wasn't for this, Wei Dan wouldn't have tried his best to protect the legitimate son of Nieliang in his previous life. The situation in his previous life was very different from now. Nieliang of the Nie family had died of illness a few years ago. His only son, Nie Qing, became a thorn in the eyes of the elders. The legitimate son of the third branch of the Nie family, Nie Yang, took advantage of the chaos to rise and secretly gain the trust of Old Master Nie. Old Master Nie was also a weirdo. He was old but young at heart. His greed for power and desire to control his descendants made people's hair stand on end. He was old and lacked the energy to deal with affairs. In order to ensure absolute authority, Old Master Nia promoted Nia Yang, who coincidentally came into his line of sight. Because Nia Yang was young, innocent, not loved by his parents, and his mother's family was weak, who would have thought that these were all Nia Yang's disguises? Nia Yang used Old Master Nia to snatch the position of the Nia family master. He secretly harmed his disloyal fellow clansmen, and sent Old Master Nia to heaven. Nia clan became Nia Yang's word, and Nia Qing's situation improved. After all, everyone was afraid of Nia Qing's father, Nia Liang. Nia Liang died of illness. Nia Qing's talent was not as good as his father's. There was nothing to fear. Raising him was just another pair of chopsticks. In order to fulfill his best friend's wish and protect Nia Qing, his brother Wei Qiong married his eldest daughter to him. Wei Qiong himself died of depression. When his brother died of illness, he was not even 50 years old. It was because he valued his feelings too much that Wei Qiong could not kill him when Wei Ci went to pay his condolences. Qiguan Rang did not comment, but he would not doubt Wei Ci's judgment of people. If Wei Ci really went to pay his condolences to Nia Liang, it would most likely be daunting but not dangerous. The only obstacle was his lord did not agree. What's the point of saying so much? If the lord doesn't agree, can you go there in private? Wei Ci laughed. The lord will agree. Wanzheng, do you dare to bet with me? Qiguan Rang scolded jokingly. When did you learn Feng Zisher and Yang Jingrong's bad temperament? What's there to bet? I won't bet. Because he knew in his heart that if they really bet, Wei Ci would definitely win. The facts proved that Qiguan Rang's guess was right. The next day, Jiang Pingji agreed to Wei Ci's request with an extremely sullen expression. After all, it was not a matter of principle. Jiang Pingji really could not dissuade Wei Ci. Of course, if it was a matter of principle, Wei Ci could not dissuade her either. I suddenly remembered that when my lord's grandmother died of illness, it was Zixiao who went on behalf of my lord. Jiang Pingji squatted on top of the wall, and looked at the figures of Wei Ci and his group gradually becoming small dots in the distance. Her face was full of melancholy. She said, "Otherwise, why would I call you my wife? You're so virtuous. What more can I ask for?" Qiguan Rang's expression froze. He looked disgusted. Jiang Pingji said with a face full of vicissitudes, "Wanzheng, do you think Nie Guangshan is really dead?" Qiguan Rang said, "Zixiao will go to pay his condolences. Whether Nie Liang is dead or alive, there will be some clues." Jiang Pingji said, "What if he's really dead? Doesn't my lord think that this is a good time to seize the opportunity to annex the Nie family of Zhongzhou? Once Nie Liang is dead, Nie Qing won't be able to shoulder the heavy responsibility. The Nie family is full of hidden dangers. It's a good time to seize the victory and pursue the enemy." Qiguan Rang sneered. "What do you think, my lord?" Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin. "I always feel that it's immoral to scheme for someone's family property the day after their corpse has yet to turn cold." Qiguan Rang was speechless. Chapter 1503. Zixiao is too rash. How can the Nie camp still be rational? What if he really doesn't come back? Old Master Sun Wen was very worried about this. The current situation was very bad. Wei Ci running over would be courting death. He understood the logic of Wei Ci's analysis, but how could people worry so much when they were agitated? Not to mention other things, if one or two disobedient and hot-tempered generals wanted to use force, could Wei Ci escape unscathed? If he doesn't come back, more than 200,000 people will be buried with him. Zixiao is not at a disadvantage. Qiguan Rang took a sip of tea and said leisurely, "Since ancient times, how many emperors have been buried alive with people, but not even this number. Besides, Zixiao is a loach, it's not easy to catch him." Sun Wen choked. He did not expect Qiguan Rang, who had always been single and unsociable, to crack a cold joke. Nie Liang's death is more or less related to the lord. I'm afraid that going to mourn will be seen as a provocation. Although Old Master Sun Wen hated the Nie family, he felt it was a pity when he thought of Nie Liang's death. Qiguan Rang smiled coldly. It's human nature. Was Wuxia really going to mourn sincerely? Don't be ridiculous. He mainly wanted to confirm if the person was really dead. He also had the intention of flaunting his strength and suppressing the Nye family. Normal people would not believe that a weasel marrying a chicken for 100 years was an act of kindness from the bottom of his heart. While the two were chatting, Wuxia and his party arrived 2 miles away from the Nye camp, and were stopped halfway. Who are you? The scouts of the Nye army looked at Wuxia and the others with hostility, and faintly surrounded them. Wuxia smiled and bowed while riding on the horse. We are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan. When the Nye army scouts heard this, their faces turned livid, and they wanted to draw their swords to kill. Wuxia smiled faintly, as if he did not see the shining blades. Instead, it was the soldiers who escorted him who came forward to protect him. When two armies fight, envoys are not to be killed. Today, we are here on the orders of our lord to mourn Duke Guangshan, not to fight in front of the battlefield. Is it your idea or someone else's? Duke Guangshan has just passed away, and you are ignoring military discipline? Wuxia was so calm that he managed to subdue a few soldiers of the Nye army. They looked at each other and finally took a step back and sent someone to pass the message. When Nye Ying and the other hot-tempered generals heard this, they exploded in anger. What does Lu Shi mean? You've angered the previous master over and over again, and now you've sent some cheap slave soldiers to pretend to be nice? This general's scolding was not polite at all. The scholars frowned when they heard this. The price of a head was only 1 copper coin. Whether it was a slave or a soldier, both of them were the lowest class in society. Even if they were angry in their hearts, Jiang Pengji had the guts to send someone over. The status of the messenger was definitely not low. It was too hurtful to scold someone as a slave soldier with a high price. Another person gritted his teeth and said, "Just a moment ago, they were playing tricks on us, angering our late lord to the point of dying of illness. Now they're sending people to offer their condolences and hold a funeral. Clearly, they're taking advantage of our Nye family for granted. Get him to scram. If he dares to take even half a step into the former lord's mourning hall, I'll make him come in on his knees and roll out like a human swine." Some of the generals were even more hot-tempered. They carried weapons that weighed 30 to 40 kilograms and wanted to go out. "Everyone, please wait a moment. I'll go chop off his head and offer it to the former master's spirit." Hearing that they were getting angrier as they spoke, Wei Yong, who was dressed in a plain morning dress, berated them with an indifferent expression. "Enough. Isn't it messy enough?" Everyone had indignant expressions on their faces. They were all men of iron and steel. How could they endure the fact that the enemy was taking advantage of them? Wei Yong said, "Take care of the former master's funeral and stabilize the army's morale to prevent Lu Shi from taking the opportunity to make trouble. Only after these are done can the former master pass away with peace of mind. If you touch the messenger, Lu Shi won't care if the former master passes the 7th day of his death. Do you want to see a new scar on the former master's body before it's even cold?" His words were so harsh that the few troublemakers did not dare to make trouble again. However, there were some who were unconvinced. If Lu Shi dares to send his troops, this general will dare to meet them head-on. The former master died unjustly. Do you still want to be humiliated by them after his death? The general straightened his neck and asked angrily, "Is the military advisor afraid of death? You know that the traitors have ill intentions, yet you still want to protect them? This isn't about being afraid of death. It's about looking at the bigger picture." Wei Yong had not slept well for 2 to 3 days. His face was abnormally pale, but he still forced himself to say, "You can act like a hero for a while. If the former master's funeral can't be held, then you can lead the troops to fight Lu Shi." The general said mournfully, "Are you going to let them flaunt their strength in front of the former master's coffin?" Wei Yong said, "Not necessarily. If they come, they should offer incense and mourn. They should act like filial sons and grandsons." When the general heard this, he felt a little better. Wei Yong asked the messenger, "Who is the messenger Lu Shi sent?" The messenger replied, "This person's surname is Wei and his name is Ci. He claims to be Lu Shi's advisor." In an instant, Everyone realized that Wei Yong's face was twisted. It was an indescribable expression. Wei Xi, isn't this Zi Shun's younger brother? As Niao Yang's right-hand man and close friend, Wei Yong's family connections had been completely uncovered. Many people who were on good or bad terms with him knew that Wei Yong had a third brother who was squatting on Lu Shi's side as an advisor. They had never imagined that the person who came to mourn this time would be Wei Xi. This time, someone laughed mockingly. It looks like Lu Shi also knows what he's doing. Another person echoed, that's true. If he didn't know what he was doing, why would he send Wei Xi over? Isn't it because he wants elder brother's protection? Wei Yong said coldly, if Wei Xi is the slightest bit disrespectful in front of the former master's coffin, he will definitely kill him himself. When these words were said, those who had other thoughts did not dare to say anything else. Before the former master Nie Liang died, he had entrusted young master Nie Qing to Wei Yong. Wei Yong was the young master's father-in-law and had a strong backing. Fan Chen said to Wei Yong in private, I've made things difficult for you. Your younger brother is also insensible. Wei Yong said, Zixiao has been a sensible child since he was young and has never caused anyone to worry about him. If he dares to come, he most likely has the confidence to escape unscathed. Fan Chen choked for a moment. Who gave him the confidence to pull out his swords? Wei Yong said in a muffled voice, his elder brother. Because he understood his elder brother's character, and knew that Wei Yong would consider the bigger picture. Wei Yong was certain that Wei Yong would not dare to let anything happen to him in front of Nie Liang's coffin. Fan Chen cast a sympathetic look at Wei Yong. With such a troublesome younger brother, Wei Yong was pitiful enough. Even though the smell of gunpowder was thick in the tent, when Wei Xi came over, the atmosphere was considered good. At least the expected scene of someone drawing a sword and rushing up to slash at him did not happen. When everyone saw the sword hanging from Wei Xi's waist, their faces immediately fell. This fellow was asking for a beating. As if they could read minds, Wei Xi stopped in front of the tent and unsheathed his sword before entering. Wei Xi first bowed to Nie Qing, then nodded his head in greeting to everyone. He took out the sacrificial items and placed them in front of the coffin. He knelt in front of the coffin and offered sacrifices. His every move was flawless. Xi came in a hurry and had not prepared the funeral oration. I could only write it in a hurry. I hope young Lang Jun will forgive me. Chapter 1504. Wei Xi said that his funeral oration was written in a hurry, so they did not have any expectations for the content of the funeral oration. Funeral oration used for funerals were mostly articles expressing mourning, remembrance, and mourning for the deceased. The current funeral oration was mainly prose and four-character rhymes, and it was easy to recite. The content was basically to remember the deceased's life experiences, praise the deceased's character, and express grief. If there were any mistakes in the funeral oration, there was a high chance that Wei Xi would be stabbed to death in front of Nie Liang's coffin. The scholar standing in the corner looked at Wei Xi's respectful and devout attitude and sneered in his heart. He said in a low voice. He had never met the late master. How could he write a heartfelt funeral oration? It's hilarious. As mentioned earlier, the content of the funeral oration was related to the deceased's life experiences. If Wei Xi did not know Nie Liang, his writing would not be appropriate. Unbeknownst to him, Wei Xi had done some research on Nie Liang. After all, his brother Wei Dan from his previous life had written more than 10 funeral oration after Nie Liang's death, almost one every year. The year Wei Dan died of illness, he was bedridden with a cold and could not get up to attend the funeral. It was Wei Xi who went on his behalf. Wei Xi did not know Nie Liang well enough, but Wei Dan definitely did. He sorted out many letters for Wei Dan's funeral, and found that most of the letters were written to his close friend Nie Liang. Some were funeral oration, some were ordinary letters, and some were long-winded chatter. Last night, I dreamed of the past, and suddenly realized that it has been 14 years since Guangshan passed away, and I am 47. Life is already half over. And the pear tree in front of the courtyard has bloomed and withered several times. Day and night, my mind is in a mess. Thinking of the first time I met you, you wore a black robe and a black crown, standing under the courtyard, talking elegantly. Thinking of all the past now, it is as bright as before, as if it was yesterday. Your laughter and words still ring in my ears. Alas, Guangshan, the heavens do not give me false years. I die of old age, my heart aches, libation. I mourn your early death, I also weep blood. Of course, these were all written by Wei Dan to Nie Liang as a friend. Wei Ci could not directly copy, or he would reveal flaws. With detailed materials, it was not difficult to write a standard elegiac oration. Other than the crackling of the white candles burning in the tent, there was only the sound of Wei Ci's sincere recitation of the funeral rites. As the funeral rites began, everyone's irascible and irrepressible emotions seemed to have found an outlet to vent. Nie Qing even knelt in front of his father's coffin and cried until his face was covered in tears. After Wei Ci finished reciting, he gave a long bow. Regardless of whether it was the funeral oration or the etiquette, no one could find fault with it. Even if everyone wanted to make things difficult for him, they had no excuse. Someone secretly wiped his tears and sneered. Was it really written in a hurry and not someone ghost wrote it? What interaction did Wei Ci have with Nie Liang? The contents of the funeral oration were all true. This level of understanding was definitely not superficial. They must have been close friends. Someone berated in a low voice. Stop talking. Don't be presumptuous in front of the deceased Lord's spirit. I know you're not happy with Wei Zixuan, but you can't simply accuse him. After Wei Ci entered the tent, his every move was under our eyes. Did the two brothers communicate at all? Not only did they not communicate, but Wei Ci did not even look at Wei Ci once, let alone act as his gunman. Kneeling in front of the spirit, Nie Qing wiped his tears. It took him a while to calm his sorrowful mood. He asked Wei Ci in a hoarse voice, "Does your lord have any instructions?" Before Nie Liang passed away due to illness, out of consideration of morality and benevolence, Jiang Pingji could not mobilize troops before the 7th day of his death. Otherwise, she would be nailed to history and be reviled. No matter how great the hatred was, according to the tradition of the deceased, no matter how big the matter was, it had to be moved to the end of the funeral. Wei Ci said, "My lord instructed me to come here to pay my respects. My every move must be respectful, and not the slightest bit negligent or rude." Nie Qing sneered and ignored Wei Ci's Tai Chi excuse. "What else?" Wei Ci said, "Stop fighting for now." Young Lang Jun helped the spirit back. Nie Qing did not speak, but Wei Ci said, "Regarding the matter of helping the spirit, the young lord has his own plans. There's no need for an outsider to help him plan. The Duke of Lanting is willing to send Zixiao to pay his respects. Whether it's sincere or not, he's up to no good. He's taking advantage of the fact that there's no one in the Nie family. After 7 days, let the Duke of Lanting wait. The enmity of the late lord's death can't be let go just like that. Please pass on these words, Zixiao." Wei Ci sighed and stood up. He knew that such a situation would happen. In his previous life, Nie Liang died early and his elder brother died of depression. Naturally, the two brothers had no conflicts and had always been respectful. This life was different. Nie Liang walked to the front of the stage and Wei Ci assisted from the side. Nie Liang's death had something to do with his lord, so the relationship between the two brothers became tense. However, Wei Ci did not regret it. They were still brothers, but they had different standpoints. I will pass on every word to the Lord. Wei Ci glanced at Wei Ci out of the corner of his eye. His eyes were surging with complicated emotions that outsiders could not understand. Wei Ci said in a low voice, "Brother, why do you have to do this?" Nie Liang had just died. The internal strife in the Nie family was fierce. More than 200,000 troops squatted at Zhangjiang Pass and fought to the death. If the power in the rear changed and their rations were cut off, Wei Ci and the others would be in a desperate situation. Don't think that the Nie family and the others couldn't do it. What couldn't those people do? Wei Ci asked him. Judge others by yourself. If the person lying in the coffin today was the Duke of Lanting, you would know why. Wei Ci was speechless and could only choose to remain silent. Brother, take care. Before Wei Ci left, he glanced at Nie Liang lying in the coffin. After bidding farewell to Nie Qing, He turned and left. Seeing Wuxia leave, everyone held their breath and almost couldn't breathe. Niaqing said, "Father-in-law, what should we do now?" Wuxia was a step behind and followed beside Niaqing. He said calmly, "The late lord made thorough arrangements when he was alive. Young lord, don't worry. The obstacles in Niaqing's path would be swept clean." The days of keeping vigil were tough. The white banners and mourning cloaks fluttered in the wind. The originally unstable morale of the soldiers had been stabilized by Nielyang's death. Wuxia continued to use his methods. Not only did the soldiers not lose their will to fight, but they were determined to fight to the death because of their grief. Because Niaqing had lost his father, he had eaten very little for several days. He looked pale and weak, and he had suffered a lot. Nielyang could only persuade him to eat a little. If he didn't eat, Nielyang would accompany him silently. Sigh. Looking at Niaqing's back, which was unsteady on his knees, Nielyang sighed in his heart. This Nielyang is really ruthless. He even hid it from his son. In reality, there were only two people who knew that Nielyang was still alive. One was Wuxia, and the other was Fanchen. Both of them were old foxes. During the vigil, the two of them cried bitterly, as if their father had died. The system laughed coldly. They wait for people like you who are ambitious and can't hold back. Nielyang secretly glanced at Wuxi's tent. Does he really not have many days left? Chapter 1505. After returning to the tent, Wei Ling restrained the sadness on his face, and his gaze was once again filled with warmth. Nielyang, who should have been lying in the coffin, was sleeping lightly on his bed. Nielyang faintly opened his eyes when he heard the sound of footsteps approaching, and he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart after confirming the identity of the person that had arrived. "What's the situation outside?" Wei Yong said in a low voice. "Everything is going smoothly. We've sent people back in secret, and those obstacles will be eliminated one by one." Thinking back to the dangers of that day, Wei Yong broke out in a cold sweat. Nielyang fainted. After the doctor took his pulse, he confirmed that his breathing and pulse had stopped. Wei Qiong cried for a long time. He and Fanchen wiped the body of the late master and changed his clothes. Unexpectedly, Nielyang coughed softly and slowly woke up. Even though Nielyang had crawled back from the gates of hell, his body was already unable to bear the burden. He finally made up his mind to pave the way for Niaqing. Those who obstructed Niaqing and the Nia clan had to die. The corpses in the coffins were easy to deal with. Nielyang had Death Warrior shadow guards by his side. Their appearance and figure were similar to his, and with a little disguise, they could pass off as genuine and deceive people. Unless it was a relative or someone who had been in contact with the corpse for a long time, it would be difficult to tell that the corpse in the coffin was fake. Once Nielyang really died, he would be able to exchange it with the corpse in the coffin. Even if Wuxia was reborn, the number of times he had really interacted with Nielyang could be counted on one hand, and he did not discover any clues at all. In order to keep it a secret, the only people who knew were Wei Yong and Fanchen, even Niaqing. It was not that Nielyang was heartless to hide it from his son. It was only because he knew that Jiang Pingji would send someone to pay her respects and to test if he was really dead. If Niaqing knew the truth, the possibility of him being exposed was too high. Since that was the case, it was better to keep it a secret and wait for the dust to settle before Wei Yong told him the truth. Nielyang sneered. "I'm afraid they're going to celebrate and hold a banquet to celebrate that I've finally been taken away by the King of Hell." Wei Yong suppressed his heartache, his expression cold. "Those people won't live for long." Nielyang smiled and said, "That's true. If the people I sent were faster, they might even be ahead of me." Wei Yong looked at his friend's haggard and weak appearance and felt extremely depressed. Just by looking at Nielyang's current appearance, who would be able to imagine that he was once the noble son of a gentry clan that was renowned in the capital and possessed peerless elegance? Nielyang saw the forbearance under his expression and suddenly revealed a faint smile. "It's not that I don't remember the promises I made with Zishan. It's just that the heavens don't give us false years. You and I are mere mortals. How can we go against the heavens?" Liang consoled him. The ancients often said that man can conquer the heavens. How can we know that we are not obeying the heavens? Perhaps Liang was born with a short lifespan. In the future, if Liang Zhen unfortunately passes away, Zishan shouldn't be too sad. If after death his spirit sees Zishan being implicated by a good person, his heart will not be at ease. Wei Yong said, if it weren't for this vile person causing mischief and poisoning you, how could you be like this? Getting to the bottom of it, the symptom lies in the Nye family. As long as I carry the identity, I will never be free. Nye Liang said, if there's a next life, I'd like to be a commoner and live in seclusion. I'd like to make 2 or 3 friends and go to banquets when I'm free. I'd like to not be bound by the secular world. Even without this vile person poisoning him, there would be another vile person causing mischief and assassinating him in the future. Ever since old Master Nye seized power and stirred up endless internal strife in the Nye family, Nye Liang had seen through this point. Unless the problem was solved from the root, what was bound to happen would still happen. Wei Yong's eyes were bloodshot and filled with tears. Nye Liang knew his good friend's temperament well. These words couldn't resolve him. If a few words could, then Wei Yong wouldn't be Wei Yong. If there's a next life, Yong will still be Guangshan's close friend. You and I will look at the moon in the wind, burn incense and boil wine, and talk about the world. That will be enough. Nye Liang laughed. You're really stubborn. Isn't it enough to be burdened by a good person for a lifetime? You want to compensate for a second life. If Nye Liang hadn't taken the initiative to befriend him, Wei Yong would most likely still be that refined scholar sitting peacefully by the window reading poetry and books. He wouldn't have been involved in the Nye family's internal strife and the world's struggle. Nye Liang felt very guilty when he mentioned this. He had let everyone down except Wei Yong down. If Wei Yong held a grudge because of his death for the rest of his life, he wouldn't be at ease even if he closed his eyes. Wei Yong didn't think it was bad. If the regrets in this life could be fulfilled in the next life, it would be a blessing. After saying so much, Nye Liang was mentally exhausted. He couldn't resist the exhaustion of his body and fell into a deep sleep. On the other side, Wei Ci returned after paying his respects. He maintained a contemplative expression along the way until Zhangjiang Pass came into view. Jiang Pingji was relieved when she saw Wei Ci return in good condition. She began to ask about serious matters. Is Nie Guangshan really dead? Wei Ci said. The corpse in the coffin is indeed him. Everyone's performance is flawless. Jiang Pingji sighed. This dear friend received his bento so quickly. He finished filming in just a few scenes. It's really beyond my expectations. I don't even know if I should continue bullying his son. I keep feeling like I'm bullying him. By the way, they didn't make things difficult for you, did they? Wei Ci had already learned to automatically filter out words that he didn't understand, such as finished filming and received his bento. They didn't make things difficult for me, but their morale didn't collapse with Nye Liang's death. Instead, they seemed to be united against a common enemy. Wei Ci was also a smart person. If outsiders wanted to make things difficult for him, they really needed to be capable. If Nye Liang is dead, then so be it. He's still causing trouble for me. Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and said, Did they have anything for you to say? The morale that had collapsed due to grief and indignation condensed. Nye Liang was forcibly prolonging his life. Wei Ci completely repeated Wei Lian's words. Jiang Pingji sneered and said, What do they mean? Are they waiting for Nye Liang to come out of his grave and challenge him for revenge? Wei Ci sighed and said, That's most likely what they mean. Then I'll fulfill their wish. I hope that Nye Liang's coffin will be buried by then. Otherwise, it won't look good if it's dug out. As a face tank, Jiang Pingji's ability to attract hatred was indeed incomparable to that of ordinary people. If Wei Lian and the others knew about this, they would draw their swords and fight her to the death. What did she mean? She was just short of saying that she wanted to dig out Nye Liang's corpse and whip it, or expose it to the wilderness. The corner of Wei Ci's mouth twitched. He always felt that it was not without reason that his lord was hated so much. When one was her enemy, not only would one's body be tortured, but one's spirit would also be attacked many times. Niel Yang's psychological quality was already high enough, but his lord was too good at infuriating people. Her series of actions could anger people to death. Because of Niel Yang's funeral, the two armies were busy with their own matters and did not make a big move. At the same time, the Nie family of Zhongzhou received the news of Niel Yang's death at the first instance. For a moment, people's hearts wavered and waves surged in the dark. Great, Nie Guangshan's death is really wonderful. He's gone. How can Nie Qing protect the Nie family business by himself? In the end, won't we have to step in? Otherwise, the Nie family will be swallowed alive by the feudal lords. Chapter 1506. Nie Liang was perhaps a complete tragedy. When he passed away, other than his wife and mother who would sincerely grieve for him, the other relatives would look solemn and sorrowful, but when they returned to the house, they couldn't help but laugh and celebrate. Among these people, even his father was among them. The relationship between father and son was so thin. Although Nie Liang was the son of the first wife, he wasn't his father's favorite son, nor was he his father's favorite successor. When he stood up to seize the Nie clan, Nie Liang's father had been sullen, vaguely viewing this son as an enemy. In his view, Nie Liang wasn't suitable to inherit the family business, and this son wasn't the successor he had personally raised, so what right did he have to take over the Nie clan? Compared to his eldest son Nie Liang, who was quite opinionated, he preferred his youngest son, who was obedient, sensible, and filial. Ever since he was young, he had personally taken care of this youngest son, whether it was his studies or his life. He was also the son who was most like him in his heart. Fathers always preferred children that resembled themselves. Although he didn't like Nie Liang, he still felt some pity for his eldest son's death. If Nie Liang was alive, he could still support his younger brother in the future. Don't cry. Do you want other families to laugh at us? Father Nie couldn't speak his mind, and he had to pretend to be grieving for his son. He finally had a break, but when he returned home, he still had to listen to his wife sobbing. He was very upset. The wife stopped crying and faintly said, "My son is gone, and I'm not allowed to grieve for him? Your father is really ruthless." Having his thoughts seen through, Father Nie felt as though his secret had been exposed. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Women don't know anything. What else can you do besides cry? Nie Liang's father didn't want to listen to his wife's crying, so he simply got up and went to sleep in his beloved concubine's room. He didn't know how many people died in their dreams that night. The Nie clan was filled with the smell of blood and a haze that couldn't be dispersed. It was late at night, but many people didn't feel sleepy. The news of Nie Liang's death gave them a chance to reshuffle. Those uncles and elders who were suppressed by Nie Liang were also eager to try. They all summoned their aides and guests over, preparing to spend the night discussing how to maximize the benefits. However, before they had time to discuss anything, black shadows broke in as if there was no one around. Someone with sharp ears heard the commotion and shouted sternly, "Who's there sneaking around?" The sound of footsteps could be heard as men dressed in black rushed in one after another. They were all holding sharp sabers in their hands. How could the crowd not know what was going on? They all shouted, "Assassin!" Unfortunately, the speed of the reinforcements could not keep up with the speed of the assassins. One by one, they lined up to report to Yan Luodian. Some of them had learned martial arts and were able to draw their swords to defend themselves, but they could not withstand the massacre of this group of desperados. Why is it so noisy outside? There were also some who had already taken off their clothes and rested. Not long after, they were awakened by the commotion. As soon as they opened their eyes, they vaguely saw a black shadow standing in front of their beds. They were instantly scared out of their wits. Without waiting for him to call out, the assassin raised his hand and chopped off his neck. Blood splattered all over the ground. The same situation played out in different places. None of the ambitious members of the Nie clan's direct line or collateral line were spared. The next day, the news spread like wildfire. Those who were lucky enough to survive almost wet their pants in fright. Their bodies were drenched in cold sweat, and they were glad that they had survived. Panic, fear, relief, anger. Their complicated feelings were mixed together into a ball, causing their hearts to feel stuffy, and their hands and feet to feel icy cold. Who do you think did this? As soon as he said this, the rest of them looked at each other. They did not dare to voice out their guesses for fear that they would be killed. After a while, one of the Nya clan members said, "Most likely, perhaps an enemy?" His answer was disdainful. This large-scale assassination was too sudden. The enemy had obviously planned this for a long time, and had planted informants around the target. That was the reason why this assassination was so swift and clean, and it didn't give anyone the chance to rescue or escape at all. How could a sudden idea have such an effect? Apart from that, the identity of the people who died last night was also worth investigating. The person who set up this assassination must be very familiar with the internal power structure of the Nya clan, the identity of the members, and the location of their residences. After thinking about it, there seemed to be only one possibility. At this moment, someone suddenly said, "Don't forget what happened to these people before they died." What happened? Everyone sweated profusely when they heard this. The news of Nya Liang's death had just arrived, and a large number of Nya clan members who had threatened Nya Liang and his son died that night. Not only within the Nya clan, some of the leaders of the forces that were attached to the Nya clan were also warned. It was easy to imagine who was the one who did this. No. Didn't Nya Guangshan die? Could it be that the news was fake and they were deliberately deceiving us? It's not that they were deceiving us. Did you forget that Nya Guangshan had several loyal lackeys around him? Nya Guangshan's plans were meticulous and ruthless. Chapter 1507. After inspection, this powder was exactly the same as the poison Nya Liang had been poisoned with in his early years. Not only was Nya Liang unable to accept this result, even Wei Yong felt it was too absurd. How old was Nya Yang when Nya Liang was poisoned? He was at most 10 years old, a child. What ability did he have to do it so flawlessly? If Nya Liang had not been careful enough to investigate Nya Yang, he would not have been able to discover that hidden compartment, much less find the culprit behind the poisoning. Even if Nya Yang was not the real culprit, he could not escape being involved in the poisoning. Nya Liang laughed self-deprecatingly, the corners of his lips curling into a mocking smile. Hunting wild geese all day, only to be pecked blind by the geese. To think that I prided myself on being smart, yet I was schemed against by a junior, truly laughable. Ever since Nya Liang found out that he had been poisoned, he had rescreened the people around him and secretly sent people to investigate the poisoning. However, no matter how he investigated, he could not find the culprit. Following the clues he had, he would only find a few uncles in the end. However, Nya Liang knew that although these uncles had the motive to poison him, they did not have the time to act. Therefore, the person who harmed him was still hiding behind the scenes. Nya Liang had never let down his guard, who knew that a new clue would appear, and he would be caught off guard. Nya Yang was younger than Nya Qing, so why would Nya Liang suspect him? After discovering that there was something wrong with Nya Yang, Nya Liang did not get rid of him immediately. Firstly, he was worried about his son Nya Qing. Secondly, he felt that Nya Yang was really strange, and it was not good to alert the enemy before figuring it out. Thirdly, being schemed against, he had to collect some interest. Nya Liang planned to push the blame of killing an elder of the same clan onto Nya Yang to clear his suspicions. This way, his son Nya Qing could see this person's true face. Wei Yong said, "I really don't know how he could have so many schemes at such a young age. He's even more shrewd than an old fox." The moment those greedy and ambitious old foxes of the Nya clan heard that Nya Liang was dead, they could not hold back their ambitions. They never thought that Nya Yang would be able to suppress his nature. To be able to do this, either Nya Yang was innocent and they suspected that he had been mistaken, or Nya Yang's mind was so deep that ordinary people could not deal with him, or could Nya Yang have already guessed that Lord Nya Liang was not dead? Wei Yong voiced out his conjecture. Nya Liang said, "What's the point of investigating this now? My body can't hold on for more than a few days. I really have the heart but not the strength. Nya Yang is indeed very scheming, it's a pity. Otherwise he could be Qing Er's right-hand man." Nie Liang was quite satisfied with his son, except for one thing. Nie Qing was too pure and kind. This kind of personality was nothing in a flourishing age. Nie Liang could protect him to become a noble son of a landowning family. But now it was troubled times. Even with Wei Dan and the others assisting him, Nie Liang was still worried. If it wasn't for the fact that he was too pure and easy to bully, Nie Liang wouldn't have had the chance to get close to him. Now their relationship was so good that it was as if Jiao could never leave Meng, and Meng could never leave Jiao. Since he was sure that Nie Liang was a hidden danger, Nie Liang planned to secretly send people to get rid of him. He wouldn't be able to see these things, but Wei Yong would help him achieve them, and the ending would be similar. Wei Yong said, "This kind of person cannot be left for long. It's best to eradicate him as soon as possible." Whether it was Nie Liang or Wei Yong, they were both cautious people, not to mention that Nie Liang was already dead. Logically, other than them, no one else knew about this conversation, but they didn't know that Nie Yang's ability was close to that of a spiritual monster, and couldn't be measured with common sense. Nie Yang knew that Nie Liang wasn't dead, so he didn't dare to let his guard down, and often let the system keep an eye on him. Of course, this conversation was heard by Nie Yang as well. The system sneered. "Now you know the difference between you and Nie Liang, right? If I didn't help you, you wouldn't even know how you died." Nie Yang's face was hidden in the shadows, but his eyes shot out a cold light, and his murderous intent spilled everywhere. The system said relentlessly, "If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to poison Nie Liang. Even if you succeeded, you would have been easily caught by him. If I didn't help you, you wouldn't have been able to restrain your ambitions when Nie Liang faked his death, and he could have gotten rid of you. If I didn't help you, now you wouldn't even know that Nie Liang already had murderous intent towards you, and was prepared to use you before sending someone to kill you. You still don't dare to admit it? You're just a mortal, no matter how scheming you are, you can't compare to my ability." Nie Yang's previous attempt to turn the tables had made the system extremely annoyed, and now it was going all out to attack him. The system also knew that Nie Yang was scheming, but no matter how scheming he was, if he didn't have the ability to realize it, it would just be a joke. Taking advantage of this, the system wanted Nie Yang to completely understand his own weight, so that he would obediently surrender and not challenge the system's authority. "This is a death trap. You'll die if you're not careful, and Nie Qing won't be able to protect you. If he finds out that you're the real murderer of his father, do you think your brotherly relationship with Nie Qing will matter? Now the only person you can rely on is me." The system laughed maliciously, like a demon whispering in Nie Yang's ear, tempting him to fall deeper into the abyss. After a while, Nie Yang laughed foolishly. His expression was still cold, but his eyes were filled with madness and murderous intent. "Rely on you." Nie Yang couldn't help but laugh, and he said, "Nie Liang wants to kill me. Are you some kind of saint?" Until now, he could not forget the lightning torture the system gave him, where he could neither live nor die. With the system's attitude, how could Nie Yang believe that it was kind to him? From Nie Yang's perspective, the system was also an evil spirit, hiding in the dark and plotting something. When the system achieved its goal, he, Nie Yang, might end up worse than death. The system laughed sinisterly. "I can at least let you live for a few days. You don't want to die without tasting power, do you?" It had been bound to Nie Yang for so many years. It knew very well about Nie Yang's obsession with power, almost to the point of being possessed. Nie Yang was silent for a long time after listening to the system. As he struggled in his heart, his young face became twisted and sinister. The system laughed. "Have you thought it through?" Nie Yang asked it. "Do you have a way to turn the tables?" Nie Liang and Wei Si started to suspect Nie Yang. Nie Yang didn't think that he could turn the tables. This was a dead end. The system said, "Yes, of course. The person who's going to die is Nie Yang. Anyway, what if you're not Nie Yang?" Nie Yang frowned. He didn't know what sinister trick the system had come up with. "You mean you want me to disguise myself as someone else and find a substitute to die for me? That's not easy." Wei Si and the others weren't familiar with him. They could find someone who looked 70 or 80% similar to him to fool them, but Nie Qing would definitely be able to recognize him. Unless the system had the ability to find someone who looked exactly like him, with the exact same height and body shape. As expected of a mortal's thinking, the system is omnipotent. Back then, I could secretly poison you, so naturally, I have the ability to help you out of danger. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for you acting smart and keeping a tail on me, Nielyong wouldn't have suspected you even if he died. The system sneered. I have something in my hands that can perfectly turn you into someone else, and at the same time, make someone else perfectly turn into you. With your rotten heart, you should be able to understand what I mean, right? Chapter 1508. What do you mean by that? Nia Yang's voice was trembling, like sandpaper rubbing against glass. There was a hint of resistance in his voice. The system could not be bothered with Nia Yang's nonsense. How could the system not know how black-hearted this kid was? If he couldn't bear to pretend now, what was he doing earlier? The system laughed mockingly. Host, don't you think it's too late for you to pretend to be a saint? Forget, you don't know what a saint is. A saint is a good person. Nia Qing is closer to the side. You won't even have that word in your next life. In terms of the darkness of the human heart, even the system can't compare to you. What did I mean just now? Do you dare touch your non-existent conscience and say you don't understand? The system's words were full of sarcasm, causing Nia Yang's face to turn green and white. Selfishly, Nia Yang did not have much feelings for Nia Qing, but he was not that cruel either. He planned to let Nia Qing live. However, the system was far more cruel than he was, and wanted to swap their identities. This way, Nia Qing would take the blame for Nia Yang and die in the hands of his father, Nia Liang, and father-in-law, Wei Yong. This way of dying. Nia Liang was so angry that he wanted to crawl back from hell, much less Nia Qing. Nia Yang sat paralyzed and hesitated for a long time before asking tiredly, "Other than this, is there no other way?" The system said, "I only have this one method. Use it if you want. I won't wait for it to expire." Looking at the flickering candlelight, Nia Yang suddenly laughed foolishly, as if he had been relieved of some burden, and fell into an even deeper abyss. "I understand. What do you want me to do?" He should have known that the system had ill intentions and would drag him into a hopeless situation sooner or later. It was too late to regret now. Nia Yang was already forced into a corner by Nia Liang. If he did not use the system's suggestion, he would not be able to break out of this hopeless situation. If he was merciful to Nia Qing, he would be cruel to himself. Years of planning and effort would be for naught. After thinking about it, Nia Yang still chose himself. Those who wanted to achieve great things did not bother with trifles. When necessary, he could even abandon his own parents and brothers, much less a cousin. Nia Liang secretly killed several of his uncles and drugged old Master Nia, causing him to become paralyzed and demented. Wasn't that also cruel and ruthless? Just as he was thinking, a slight movement came from outside. Nia Yang's mind sounded the alarm, and a hint of fierceness appeared in his eyes. Nia Yang's originally clear voice became hoarse from crying, but the smile in his eyes did not diminish. Familiar footsteps came over. Nia Qing's originally clear voice had become hoarse from crying, but the smile in her words did not diminish. Nia Yang quickly adjusted his expression and returned to his gentle and harmless self, standing up. "Brother, why are you here?" Nia Qing said. "I heard from the soldiers that you haven't eaten much for 2 days. This brother had the kitchen make some appetizers for you. You must be tired from keeping vigil for your father these days. Even if you have a bad appetite, you should at least eat something to fill your stomach." "A yang? Yang. Niev yang. He was along. He never of. Yang. No, nothing. It's just that I really have no appetite right now. Yang eat. Of yang nya, niev yang of I. Yang is not to nya. I of. Yang with, Nia Yang said. Yang of it of. Yang you not. Of. Nia Yang could not argue with him and ate the food like it tasted like wax. Seeing that Nia Qing was defenseless, Yang felt complicated. Nia Qing read military books and learned new things. Nia Yang asked the system, "What's your idea?" Could it be a possession in the novels? The system smiled lazily. No, I can do what you said, but it's too much effort. For a soul, a body born from a mother's womb is the most suitable. You and Nieching exchange souls. The biggest possibility is that both of you will become sickly and die early because of the instability of your soul. My idea is to disguise yourself. This disguise can change your appearance to that of the other. The system was in a good mood, so it spoke more. You and Nieching are inseparable. You know his hobbies, relationships, habits, conversation style. It's not difficult to disguise yourself, and the possibility of being seen through is low. Wei Yong may be Nieching's father-in-law, but they don't have much contact, so their understanding is limited. As long as you don't make any fatal mistakes, Wei Yong may be suspicious, but at most he will think it's because of the death of his father. Don't you think this idea is perfect? With Nieching's identity, you'll be the rightful young master. Everything will be at your fingertips. Actually, thinking about it, Nie Yang's previous schemes were just messing around. If Nie Yang had taken advantage of Nieching's young age and unstable personality to take his identity, why would he need to plot against Nie Yang? The system's methods could easily smooth a rough road, but mortals could not. A bitter smile appeared on Nie Yang's face. It was indeed at his fingertips. At the same time, his fear of the system increased. To Nie Yang, the system and Nie Liang were both swords hanging over his head. The difference was that Nie Liang's sword was about to fall, and his death was near, but the system did not know. They were all enemies. Nie Yang was not someone who was willing to be enslaved. Even if the system used force to make him submit, his rebellious nature was still there. After 2 hours, Nieching prepared to leave, but Nie Yang urged him to stay. It's getting late. Why don't you rest here, brother? Nieching smiled. That's good too. We haven't talked at night in a long time. Their brotherly love was deep. Wei Dan was the one with the most pain in the ass. He knew that there was something wrong with Nie Yang, but he could not tell his son-in-law. Fortunately, Nie Yang was surrounded by spies. If he dared to make the slightest movement, what awaited him would be his head. Time passed quickly. Nie Liang's death passed in the blink of an eye. As the eldest son of the first wife, Nieching should return to his hometown, and let Nie Liang return to his roots. Wei Dan said, the front lines can still be delayed for a while. Young master can rest assured. After the funeral of the late master is settled, we will take revenge for the late master. Nieching was hesitant. Father passed away, and we don't know what the situation is like in the clan. I'm afraid there will be a storm of blood when we return, Wei Dan said. Before the late master passed away, he already made proper arrangements. Young master does not need to worry. Nieching did not think that his father would even worry about this. An indescribable sorrow welled up in his heart, and his eyes reddened. Right, this subject wants to borrow someone from young master. Who? Wei Dan said, Nie Yang. Why does father-in-law want to borrow a Yang? He is usually very lazy and leisurely. If father-in-law wants him to do something, don't have too much hope. Nieching smiled. Fortunately, he is still young and has good talent. With more experience, he can become a talent who can take charge of things. Father-in-law should teach him more. Wei Dan felt his stomach ache when he heard this. At the same time, he became more wary. Nie Yang's thoughts were as deep as the sea. Although Nieching was kind and romantic, he did not lack any brains. He could hide it from Nieching and maintain such a good relationship. It could be seen that he could act. Chapter 1509. As a bugged listening device, the system had a firm grasp of Nie Liang, Wei Yong and the others' movements and conversations. Knowing the two's plan, the system gloated at Nie Yang. They're about to make a move. Wei Yong plans to let Nieching help his spirit back and found an excuse to make you stay. If you want to make a move and switch identities, you have to do it within these 2 days. Otherwise, you won't have a chance. After spending some time to get used to it, Nie Yang was no longer as resistant and uncomfortable as before. I know. To be safe, I planned to make a move on the last night. If he changed his identity earlier, Nie Qing would definitely cause a ruckus and ruin his plan. It would be better to switch identities on the last night. When Nie Qing woke up, what awaited him would be his father-in-law's butcher knife. Thinking of that situation, Nie Yang laughed until tears came out of his eyes. The system was secretly speechless at Nie Yang's ruthlessness. On the last night of helping the spirit home, Nie Yang found an excuse to stay in Nie Qing's tent. The two brothers talked about many things that night. Not long after, Nie Qing fell asleep. Nie Yang, who was pretending to sleep, opened his eyes. He took out 2 pills the size of longans from his sleeves. These were the appearance change pills that the system had given him. After asking about the method to use it, the system gave him a bottle of sleeping powder that could make people fall into a deep sleep with just a sniff. For the appearance change pills to work, the target's blood had to be taken and mixed with it to be consumed. Nie Qing wasn't in a deep sleep. If the blood was taken directly, it might wake him up. Nie Yang's hands trembled as he cut Nie Qing's finger and stabbed himself. He mixed Nie Qing's blood with pills and swallowed it. Not long after, his slender body became more plump, his skin squirming like it was alive, making people's hair stand on end. When the squirming subsided, Nie Yang stood up and looked in the mirror. The person in the mirror was Nie Qing's face. As expected. Just where did the system come from? How could it have such a treacherous method? Not only the face, figure, skin, even the eyes and aura were the same as Nie Qing's. The system reminded. As the saying goes, one's appearance comes from one's heart. You have to control your heart. Otherwise, you'll be easily discovered. The only reason why Nie Yang looked so similar right now was because of the miraculous effects of the transfiguration pill. Once Nie Yang got used to it, his temperament would also change, and he would eventually reveal his flaws. However, this was nothing. Nie Yang took Nie Qing's place to carry the spirit back. For the time being, they were separated from Wei Yong. That old fox would not discover them. Nie Yang's eyelids drooped. I understand. I'll be careful. He fed the other pill to Nie Qing. Nie Qing fell into a deep sleep, and Nie Yang watched as Nie Qing's face turned into his. After ensuring that there were no mistakes, Nie Yang went back to sleep. However, he tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. He stayed up until dawn. That night, not only did Nie Yang not sleep well, Wei Yong was also in no mood to sleep. Master! Wei Yong suppressed his sobs and held Nie Liang's hands that were almost as thin as bones tightly in an attempt to keep him awake. Nie Liang was already on the verge of death, but somehow, a surge of vitality surged through his almost dried-up body, giving him the strength to finish his sentence. Zishan, take good care of. If there's anything wrong, just scold and teach. Nie Liang felt that his vitality was quickly draining away. He subconsciously held Wei Yong's hands tightly and said, "The Nie family, if we can't save them, let them be." Nie Liang had sacrificed his life for the Nie family, but he could not let his friend fall because of him. Wei Yong naturally nodded his head and agreed to whatever Nie Liang said. Liang has a close friend like you. This life is not a loss. The last few words were said with his mouth. Wei Yong said, "This subject feels the same." After he answered, he found that Nie Liang had already closed his eyes and his raised hands had loosened their grip. His heart thumping, Wei Yong knelt beside the bed and stared blankly for a long time before he reacted. He leaned to the side and suppressed his sobs. Not long after, Fan Chen came late. Seeing Wei Yong's situation, how could he not guess? Black shadows appeared in front of him, and he almost fainted. Zishan, Master's funeral matters. Fan Chen took a step forward and almost stumbled to the ground. Only then did he find that his legs were so weak that he had no strength. Act according to the plan. Wei Yong suppressed his grief with difficulty and said hoarsely, "Master has not gone far. Do not let him worry." The trap had been set, and they were just waiting for the prey to take the bait. At the first glimmer of dawn, Nie Yang stood up and neatly dressed Nie Qing's mourning clothes. He gave a flawless smile in the mirror. However, today was the day to support the spirit back, so there was no need to smile. Therefore, Nie Yang changed his expression to one of grief and silence and strode away. Walking out of the tent, Nie Yang glanced back and finally steeled his heart to turn and leave. Father-in-law. Nie Yang respectfully called out to Wei Yong. The two were father and son-in-law, but they were also ruler and subject. Nie Qing still referred to him as father-in-law. It could be seen how important Wei Yong was in his heart. Thus, even if Nie Yang was very wary of this person, he could not act against Wei Yong in the short term. Wei Yong's face was extremely pale, and he looked somewhat dazed. He gathered his spirits and said to his son-in-law, "The journey is long. Young master has worked hard on the matter of supporting the spirit." Nie Yang asked a few questions out of concern, completely acting like a different Nie Qing. The system watched his performance and was secretly speechless. Nie Yang was really born in the wrong era, or else he would have swept the Oscars. Wei Yong said weakly, "It's nothing. Last night, I thought about my late master's past and couldn't control my emotions, so I couldn't sleep." The system reminded Nie Yang in a timely manner. This morning, Nie Yang couldn't take it anymore and passed away. Wei Yong was heartbroken and cried the whole night. "Don't expose him. He looks so pitiful." The person lying in the coffin now is not Nie Liang's substitute, but Nie Liang himself. Nie Liang's shrouds were all changed by him. If that's the case, father and son will die on the same day. I wonder how Nie Liang, who left first, will feel when he sees his son catching up to him on the road to hell. Nie Yang sighed. "Looking at the current situation, don't you think you're too cold-hearted, system?" The system wanted to roll its eyes. It wasn't a human. It was the highest form of life that surpassed humans. Humans were just ants. No matter how tragic their deaths were, it would not be able to arouse its sympathy. Nie Yang was really stupid to use a human's mind to judge it. Wei Yong said, "The auspicious time is here, young master, go on your way." Nie Yang warned, "A Yang's personality. If there's anything wrong with him, please forgive him, father-in-law." Wei Yong could not even smile in response, and only said that he would take care of Nie Yang. Raise the spirit. The white banner fluttered, and the mournful cries shook the heavens. Nie Yang supported the spirit and went on his way. Only when the tens of thousands of people left his sight did Wei Yong's expression turn as cold as ice. His hands clenched into fists that made people's teeth ache. Go back. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.